Okay, welcome back to our March 23rd Board of County Commissioners meeting. We are going to reconvene starting with departmental number 1, then we will go to public hearing quasi judicial number 1.
Good afternoon,
Mrs. Manning.
Commissioners. Jennifer Manning, OMB Director. The first item on the agenda is permission to apply for the FY 2022 Alternative Water Supply funding through South Florida Water Management. The amount is $1.8 million. It requires a $1.8 million match. This is for the construction of the North Water Treatment Plant Floridian Aquifer wells. Second item is permission to apply for the FY21 Florida Boater Improvement Program, which is FBIP for acronym. And this is for the boat renovation at the Jensen Beach Causeway. The award would be $50,000 and requires a $51,000 match, which is budgeted in the boat ramp renovation capital budget. The third item is permission to apply for the FY21 FBIP boat ramp renovations at the Charlie Layton Park. The grant award would be, if successful, $40,000. It also requires a $39,000 match, which is also budgeted in the boat ramp renovation capital projects. And let's go for another one. Okay. The fourth is permission to apply for the FY21 FBIP grant fund for the boat ramp renovation at the J&S boat ramp. This award would be for $35,000, requiring a $36,000 match, which is also budgeted in the CIP. Fifth item is permission to apply for the Recreational Trails Program grant. It's in the amount of $400,000, requires a $400,000 match. This would be to fund the RTF grant. It will be used to invest in anti-degradation measures, additional safety for trails, and public access in the CRA area. The match will come from the CRA tax increment finance. The sixth item is permission to apply for the FY 2022 E911 grant, and it's in the amount of $709,000, and it's to upgrade their software, their hardware and software, be in line with their new technology, NG 911. Seventh item is permission to apply for the FY 2022 E911 grant. This is also for for the GIS information to prepare their data for the NG 911 program. It's in the amount of $29,700. It does not require a match, only staff time. Eighth item is permission. First, before I go on to the next two items, the agreement in the document, the signature block is incorrect, and that will be corrected once the item is approved. So this one is permission to apply to apply and accept the Federal Emergency Management FDEM grant for the acquisition of the Hope Heights 10 residences. And the amount is estimated total cost of $3.2 million. The grant would be for $2.4 million, requiring a $776,000 match. The ninth item is also permission to apply to and accept the FEMA, I should just shorten it, FEMA FDM Hazard Mitigation Grant for the Hope Heights Pump Station and Drainage Phase 1. This grant award would be for $193,884. It requires a $60,400 match. Did you want me to stop there, or did you have a comment, or?
Go ahead and
Just
go
finish?
through
Okay.
them all, and then we'll do public comment
Okay.
after that.
All right. 10th item, permission to accept the Local Planning Agency grant through the Florida Department of Transportation for resurfacing of County Road 707, Southeast Beach Road. The grant award is estimated at $3.8 million. The total project cost is $4.8 million, and it would require roughly $1.1 million, depending on costs that are not covered under the grant. The The next few items are OMB items that require board approval, and so we are in accordance with our general accepted accounting principles. We wanted to adjust the budgets, and this first item, A, is allocation of the fiscal year 2021 salary adjustments. During our budget process, the board adopted salary increases for our contracted or union positions as well as HRM position, which is a non-union. The budgets were placed in reserves. And annually, we come to the board and request to remove them from reserve to allocate them, respectively. And we're also requesting to remove the salary adjustments for the IAFF as well. That's placed in reserves. Item B is the budget resolution for the federal FEMA again. I'm going to say FEMA reimbursable expenses. This relates to the COVID vaccination program we spoke about the other day, where we rented a space in the mall to with the health department along with emergency services. And this is setting up a budget that is reimbursable at 100% through FEMA. And this is going to cover staff expenses, janitorial supplies, safety and personal protective equipment, and office equipment and supplies. We're estimating roughly $200,000, and that can change at, depending on how long the program lasts. Item C is a budget resolution to allocate additional private contribution for Savannah Roundabout. The developer has agreed to pay $121,557.05 for the additional roundabout request, and a budget resolution is required to appropriate those funds. Item D is a budget resolution to amend the Florida Emergency Medical Services Trust Grant to allocate the carryover dollars from previous years. And this is just a general practice. Whatever is left over at the end of the year, we get approval from the state to reallocate those funds into the new year. And the amount is just $5,064. Item E is a budget resolution to allocate funding from the developer contribution again. This is for to construct a turn lane on Northeast 14th Street, and it's in the amount of $61,000, $495.
Okay.
Yeah.
Last item?
That is the last item.
Okay, we have commissioner lights on and we have public comment. You would like to speak after public comment? Commissioner Hurd?
Yes, I just wondered, there were a number of grants for boat ramp improvements, and that's always great to see. The number one priority was Sanskrit Park. Do we have money in our budget in order to complete all the improvements that we need to for the boat ramps and docks at Sanskrit Park?
Jim Gordon, Public Works Director. It's my understanding that, yes, the Sanskrit project is moving along as planned. I would like to verify with our Parks Director since it's their project, but it is my understanding that it is funded.
Terrific, thanks.
Great. We are going to take public comment. We have one speaker request for Mr. Colby Beasall.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Just pull this, if you can, pull that, mic right up to you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. As I review DEP 1, I see our acquisition project is number 8 and roughly $2.4 million for acquisition costs for the property. Now divided between 10 houses, that's only $240,000. Now, if they take into account the new and escalated house prices that we've seen throughout Martin County, how is that going to affect it? Not only that, with the new apartment complex that's being built just south of us to the east, we're also concerned that with the new water levels that have been that came out after the 100-year flood, now we're going to be more substantial. We're going to be left out to be flooded again. Now, I know you guys have cleared out our ponds and you're working to get the pump project, and obviously you're working to get FEMA and DEM on board. But what is our timeline? because there's still 3 of us out of the 10 that live in our homes. And I put another 100 grand into my house, 75 from insurance, and then 25 out of my own pocket to put my house back to the way it was before it flooded. Now, before the flood, I spent 3 years renovating my home, getting it the way I wanted it. And then we had the project to redo the drainage in the neighborhood. And then we ran out of funding to put the pump in. And then we had a scramble to pump the water north and then pump it east and west. And then Kitchen Creek backed up. And then Jonathan Dickinson backed up. I'm just trying to figure out a timeline of when this is going to happen.
Okay, great. Well, you have a number of questions. I'm going to give staff an opportunity on the matching funds and the drainage and the timeline. Mr. Gordon?
Yep. So the funds that you referenced are the 75% contribution from the FEMA. There's also a 25% contribution from the county, and that's the other $776,000. So when you add those two together, it's about 320 or a little over 300. So, but the way we're going to purchase the homes is we are going to do an appraisal on the homes, and we're going to make an offer for the homes based on the market value. So if that exceeds that number, it exceeds the number, and we'll go back to FEMA for an amendment. And then for a timeline, we need, once we get this contract executed, if the board approves it, it's going to be sent to DEM at the state level. They have to assign it and approve it, and then it goes up to FEMA. They sign it and approve it, and then it comes back to us. Once all 3 parties have executed the agreement, it becomes an active contract, and then we can begin the process of the appraisals and all of those things.
Sir, you can't, yeah, you can't,
Yeah, I would expect it to
Speak from the
take
audience.
weeks and I can talk to you afterwards if you want to just catch me outside, but it could take weeks to get it back from FEMA, and then after that, we'll get started.
oh. So why don't, we'll have staff, meet you in the lobby, and so to answer the remainder of the questions. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. Commissioner Smith, you have your light on.
I was just going to make a motion to accept all the items, and the only clarification I needed, Jennifer, was do you need in the motion that the signature block or that it gets changed, or are you just going to do that administratively?
Yeah, we're just going to do an administrative.
I guess you don't need that as-
Bring to your attention.
Okay, great.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Smith, seconded by Commissioner Jenkins. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And then you will be. Okay, we are going to move now to public hearing quasi judicial number 1, Sable Point request for major final site plan approval. Mr. Matt.
Quasi, you gotta.
Oh, yes, it's quasi judicial, and, thank you. Ex parte,
Mention that. At least, yeah.
from, Commissioners, Commissioner Jenkins.
Huh?
Ex parte,
Oh, none, thank you.
Commissioner Smith,
I do in their file.
Commissioner Campy.
I don't believe I have any, and I come to this with an open mind.
I want to change my mind. I did have a conversation with Morris now that I think about it, so it has been filed.
Okay.
If I have any, they've been filed.
Same here, if any, they've been filed. Does the applicant have return receipts? LPA?
Good afternoon. For the record, Bob Raines with the Gunster Law Firm here on behalf of the applicant. The return receipts were turned in at the LPA. It was a dual notice for this meeting.
Okay, great. And are there any interveners? No. And would stand, please, if you are being sworn in.
Can you raise your right hands? Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Okay, Mr. Staley.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Matt Staley, Senior Planner with Growth Management. A copy of my work history and agenda item has been provided. This is a request by Constance Hare and Anthony and Vanessa Palma for approval of a final site plan proposing a residential subdivision consisting of 68 single-family lots with associated infrastructure and preserve areas for a gross residential density of 2.31 units per acre. The 30.26 acre site is located approximately 2,500 feet east of Northeast Savannah Road at the end of the Northeast Cedar Street right-of-way. Included in this application is a request for a certificate of public facilities reservation. The property has a zoning designation of R2 Single Family Residential District and a future land use designation of low density, as you can see here, allowing up to 5 units per acre. There are 7.56 acres of preserve area proposed for the project as described in the preserve area management plan included with this application. As you can see here, it's on the eastern edge of the property. The project is located within the primary urban service boundary, and Martin County Utilities will provide potable water and sanitary sewer service. Primary access to the site is proposed via Northeast Cedar Street up here. Let me zoom in a little bit. Site plan. So as you can see, here's Northeast Cedar Street. That's going to be the primary access. And 2 additional proposed emergency access connections through Lot 1 through Lot 26, which is down here on the southern property boundary, Lot 26 of Leilani Heights, and also via Northeast Palmetto Drive South, which is over near the FEC Railway crossing here, and it will access through the site this way. Within 60 days of final site plan approval, the owner shall dedicate a drainage access and maintenance easement to the county over the limits of Lot 26 of Leilani Heights, fronting Northeast 23rd Terrace. Construction traffic will be prohibited from using Northeast 23rd Terrace to access the site. And staff has reviewed the application and finds that it complies with the LDR as detailed within the staff report. And staff recommends approval of this development application as consistent with the guidelines and standards of the applicable comp plan goals, objectives, and policies as implemented in the LDR. Additionally, this matter was heard before the local planning agency on March 4th, and where they voted 4-0 for recommendation of approval. So with that, staff moves that the board receive and file the agenda item summary and all of its attachments, including the staff report, for the record as Exhibit 1, and move that the board approve the final site plan and preserve area management plan for Sable Point and adopt the resolution of approval. And that concludes my presentation. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. I don't see any questions. Does the applicant have a presentation?
Yes, again, good afternoon, Commissioners. For the record, Bob Raines with the Gunster Law Firm here on behalf of the applicant. We have received and reviewed the staff report and are pleased to state that we do agree with the staff comments and recommendations in that staff report. I would like to just point out, I think Matt touched on it briefly, but I just wanted to kind of emphasize, this is a straight zoning application. This is not a PUD. This is a by right application, and we're not asking for any waivers or variances or anything of that nature. I would just point out and emphasize in the staff report on page, well, it's page 6 of my staff report, but under section F, which is the compliance with the comprehensive growth management plan requirements, the staff states in this report, staff has reviewed this application and finds that it complies with the LDRs as detailed within this report. Staff recommends approval of this development application as consistent with the guidelines and standards of the applicable comprehensive plan, goals, objectives, and policies as implemented in the LDRs. So we do have that staff recommendation, and they agree that we meet all these rules and requirements. I am going to ask Morris Crady just to come up give a brief presentation with respect to the site plan. We'll kind of walk you through that a little bit more detail, and then I'll ask Morris a few questions, and we'll be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Bob. Again, for the record, my name is Morris Crady, Senior Vice President with Lucido & Associates. I've been working in Martin County for the past 35 years. And I'll give you a little bit of project and specific information and some little more history. This is one of the last remaining infill parcels in the Jensen Beach area. You'll note in this area here is the Jensen Dunes Assisted Living Facility, and most of this property behind here in between, this is the town of Ocean Breeze to the north of us, but most of this is preserve area that was preserved as part of the Jensen Dunes Assisted Living Facility. And then this is Cedar Street, which is the primary access off of Savannah Road. And coming down Cedar Street, this is the St. Martin de Porres Catholic Church. And then just to the east of that is the Villa Assumpta Assisted Living Facility that was approved in the 1980s. In fact, I reviewed that when I was a Martin County staff planner. And if you recall, Joe Selly was a big part of getting that project approved. It is run and operated by the Palm Beach Diocese. And it's probably one of the first assisted living facilities in Martin County. So part of this project is extending Cedar Street through right-of-way that was donated by Villa Assumpta during that approval as a condition of a PUD application. And so that provides the legal access to this property, which is 18 acres, which is owned by Constance Hare. And she also and her family owns 3 lots in here, and part of our application is to create a 4th lot so that this will be a family compound that will continue to exist. And this has a great long project history too. This is the one of the few private driveways across FEC Railroad, and I think that was done during the late 1800s, right, and the beginning of and this was all a pineapple plantation at one time, and that was a stop to pick up pineapples. So the property to the south here is owned by the Palmers. That's why you see their name in here. This is 12 acres that are owned by Anthony Palmer and his wife, and they also own Lot 26, which is this parcel here within the Leilani Heights subdivision. And it's good that these projects are coming together and developing as a unified project, because the only legal access for the Palmer property is actually this Lot 26. And so and that would be through Leilani Heights. And as most of you know, Leilani Heights has only one way in and one way out, and it crosses Warner Creek at this point. And if you're having the history of the 2004-2005 hurricanes, you'll know that bridge was compromised during those events, and they had no way in and out of their property. So we worked with the Leilani Heights Homeowners Association, and David Taylor in particular, who is here, was appointed on a committee to work with us and come up with an emergency access plan for Lot 26 that I'll go into in a moment, and also to provide a utility connection that will improve service and reliability, and also provide a drainage easement over that lot so they can correct a drainage problem on the road. But all of the roads in Leilani Heights are public roads that are maintained by the county. So part of our development will be to construct Cedar Street, to improve Cedar Street. We're providing an emergency access for the Hares because, as you know, there's a fire station on Savannah Road, so we want them to have an access in case there is an emergency, so they don't have to go all the way around to get to the property. But that is strictly for emergency access. It's not for any other purpose, and the county will have a Knox box and will have full control over that access. As was mentioned, the property has been low-density residential since 1982, the day of the comprehensive plan, and it's never changed, and we're not changing it. It's been zoned R2 since 1967, and the comprehensive plan does allow the ability to develop under the Category C zoning district if you're developing in a manner that's consistent with the surrounding property. So we're doing more or less exactly what Leilani Heights did in terms of lot size and development standards. However, one of the things that changed since that project was developed is there's a preserve requirement, there's retention requirements, and so out of 5 units per acre, we're only able to get about half that density, but we're at about 2.3 units per acre. because of the preserve areas and the retention areas. And you can see that this is one of the few sites in Martin County that had some topography, a lot of topography. So we had to create retention areas where they made sense. And luckily, most of our retention areas are along the perimeter in this area. And we had to construct retaining walls to create the drainage flow and to meet the county stormwater requirements. This is the lot that we're creating for the Hares that is done by way of the subdivision plat. And again, this is their access into their property. This is the emergency access provision to get to their site. And then this is the access to the south. And I'll go into that a little more detail in the last two slides. But this was our density transition zone compliance exhibit that shows our densities as compared to Leilani Heights. And in all cases, we're less density because of the additional requirements that required to meet today. This is Villa Assumpta Preserve Area right here. This is preserve area within Jensen Dunes. So we've created a project that I believe is compatible with all surrounding properties. And although we didn't have to provide a buffer next to Leilani Heights, we did want to reduce our impacts and we tried to minimize the impact as much as possible by creating these retention areas that will be landscaped along their property border. And also in this area where we couldn't put retention because of the elevation, we agreed to a voluntary a minimum 25-foot landscape easement that we worked out with the adjacent residences that will be fully vegetated with trees and shrubs, and it should provide a very meaningful buffer. But this is lot 26. We're actually allowing that to be used. Again, it's a drainage, access, utility, and maintenance easement that will go to Martin County. We will have no control over it. We will construct the improvements as part of this development plan, and we will maintain the lawn. It will be just mowed by the HOA, the Sable Point HOA will actually be responsible for maintaining the lawn, but the county will have maintenance responsibility over the improvements once they're turned over to the county. So again, this is just a blow up of what that looks like, again, we're did our best to work with these residents to make their the impact on their existing residences as less as possible. And with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions. Like I said, I do have David Taylor is here to speak on behalf of Leilani Heights, but I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have otherwise.
And Morris, just for the record, have you been sworn in?
Yes.
And you're familiar with the Martin County rules and regulations and the comprehensive plan, correct?
Yes.
And you prepared the plans that were shown today and the plans for this project?
Yes.
And in your professional opinion, do they meet all the rules and requirements of the land development regulations and the comprehensive plan?
They do.
Thank you. So that's our presentation, Commissioners. I believe, our obligation today is to show that we meet all the rules and regulations, and I think we've done that through the staff report and Mr. Crady's presentation, and as he said, we'll be glad to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Commissioner Smith?
Yeah,
you have
Morris, can you
questions?
come back up, please? So first and foremost, thank you, Morris. Morris did, I think, a really good job of laying out kind of the history a little bit and how we've gotten to where we are today. I want to add just a little bit more to it and just highlight a couple things that Morris talked about. First and foremost, the Hare family and their heirs to this property is significant to Jensen Beach. It's one of the earliest settlements in Jensen, and probably some of the most spectacular property anywheres along the ridge that runs up Skyline up to Fort Pierce. It's absolutely spectacular back there. For years, I had met with the family and talked about their wishes as to what they wanted to try to accomplish with the property, and wanted to make sure that their family had parcels that could be separate, but also together, so that this compound that Morris has highlighted does that in this application, which is really special because the conversation always with the family always went back to how can we preserve what we've had all these decades, and keep our family place complete, which I think they've accomplished. A couple, again, and Morris touched on a lot of this, some of the really interesting, unique pieces to this is the private railroad crossing. We have one up it's actually in St. Lucie County, but Eden Lawn has a private crossing. Do you have any down at Hope Sound? Any privates?
Not anymore, no.
So I think, other than Pitchford's Landing, I mean, Pitchford's has a private, Eden Lawn has a private, and the Hare property has a private. And when you think of every time we've ever had a conversation about FEC and crossings and, could you modify one, could you change one, could you add one, it's like, no. And so historically, they're important, and historically, they're incredibly special to Jensen Beach. So I'd love to just recognize Morris and the applicants' efforts to keep all of this intact. The access points for fire rescue are super important. They shouldn't go underestimated. They both have Knox gates, one at the northeast corner and one down in Leilani. On the Leilani side of this conversation, Dave, I really want to thank you for all your help. This has been an ongoing conversation for my entire 20 years of doing this as to how, if this property were ever to develop, how would this connection get made, and what would it do, and how would we be able to protect Leilani in the future from any access. And so I think, again, we've done a really good job getting there. I can't tell you the importance, even though we spent millions of dollars working on Warner Creek and trying to fix all of the impediments. We still have one more major fix that we need to address right there by the post office, which is where the bridge kind of failed us that one time, and we flooded for days on end. So much of that has gotten fixed, but there's still more to do. But the residents in Leilani had no choice of access. So fire rescue for a fair amount of time provided access, which was not the best thing to have. So we've learned a lot, obviously, over the last 40, 50 years in development, and I don't, these single access point neighborhoods are really difficult because these kind of things happen. And so, again, thank you for helping on all levels to address this. The topography is interesting, and the retaining walls are important to make sure we keep that. The preserve area around the family compound is super special and super important to keep. I did talk to Morris, and if it's not, unfortunately, I wish this weren't straight zoning. I wish it were a PUD of some sort. But what's interesting on the drawing, and I don't know if you all looked at the detail, and maybe it's something that we should address in the future relative to sidewalk design in neighborhoods. What's interesting is that there's a fair amount of there's 50 foot of right-of-way carved out, and I don't know if Morris, if you can go to that. If you were to look on this size plan, I don't know if you could probably see it on your screen, probably not, but maybe Morris can highlight it. There's a sidewalk on the outer edge, and then on the inner edge of the northern piece, there's a sidewalk. This hatched, go down, Morris. Yeah, that hatched dotted line.
Talking about along here?
Yeah, the dark kind of speckled little line, and that's the sidewalk. I'd like to see us in the future think about making sure we had sidewalks on both sides of the street. We have enough right-of-way here. We could have done it within the right-of-way that's provided. That is open space. And then there's also a utility easement that's 10 foot wide, I think, Morris, that goes on the east side of that right-of-way delineation. And so just for something to think about for the future, because I assume, Morris, this is going to be a more than not kid type neighborhood, given the schools in Jensen and their proximity to Jensen Beach Elementary and the new school that's coming.
Yep.
And so even though they're cul-de-sac neighborhoods, it would have made a lot of sense to have sidewalks on both sides versus kids coming and going. But nonetheless, I think you all did a great job fitting this in here. And again, on behalf of the family, from my conversations with them all these years, I think you and the applicant have achieved certainly what we talked about getting done. So thank you for all that.
Sounded like that was going to turn into a motion.
Well, that is a motion for approval pending public comment.
Okay. We have one public speaker form, David Taylor. If anybody else would like to speak on this item, please complete a form and pass that to the bailiff.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
My name is David Taylor, and I live in Leilani Heights, and I was tapped to had a committee that looked into this issue when it came to light, and our committee were people with various perspectives. And what we did is we examined it very thoroughly, and we talked to our people about it, specifically the 22 people, lot owners that border it. And we went to Morris with some of our concerns, and we kind of tweaked the plan a little bit. So I'd just like to report that everything is completely acceptable to us. What we did is, once we came to agreement, we went back to all of our people, all 400 lots in Leilani, and we mailed them a very detailed explanation of the plan of what would this mean. And then we did an open house at a later date where we had the full-size plans and people could come ask questions and so forth. And then we asked for their feedback by a certain point. And of the people that chose to give feedback, about 97.9% of them agreed that they accept the plan and everything's good. Now, for our community, we are happy to get the water and the sewer connected because we used to be a separate water system in Leilani. And now this, since the county took it over about 20 years ago, this will allow us to have better flow and different access points and so forth. So that will also help Sable Point and the people to the north, I assume. So we're happy with that. We're very happy with the emergency access that's been part of this plan. And we're very happy with the buffering, how it all came out. And we're very happy with the water retention area on Lot 26, which will solve a problem that we've had long standing there. So in summary, we're good.
Great. It's nice to hear about the public participation. So Commissioner Smith, did you have something to add?
Yeah, David, just thank you for all of that. You gave a very nice response, which is fantastic. I can tell you through the years, and you well know this, it has been an incredibly controversial discussion through the years, both the connection drainage problems
Yes.
And even the school connection we used to have with Gents Beach Elementary. And so of a lot of our neighborhoods, Leilani is certainly one of the more engaging neighborhoods,
Yes.
and they have a lot of opinions.
We-
And to be able to come forward and with this kind of support means a lot. And David, thank you
Well,
for
we took
all
the
your
lead
effort.
and we did the hard work here.
Yeah, but
It wasn't
thank you.
easy, but we got it done and everybody's happy.
Thank you so much, sir.
you for
I
your-
appreciate it.
Great.
7 points.
We have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Smith, seconded by Commissioner Campy. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay. Our next item of business is going to be Departmental Number 4, Business Development Board 2020 Annual Report, presented by George Stokas.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. George Stokas, Assistant County Administrator. We're here today to receive a presentation that's required by the contract that we have with the Business Development Board. With me today is Joan Goodrich, who's hiding behind the row of the chairs here. Joan Goodrich, who is the Director of the Business Development Board, and then the Chairman or President of the Business Development Board. Is, oh, you're going to do a combo. Okay.
So you bundled.
Is Kate Cotner. Thank you
Bundle.
very much.
Well, good afternoon now, everyone. I just wanted to briefly introduce myself. I know all of you. I'm Kate Cotner. I'm the Senior External Affairs Advisor with Florida Power and Light Company. But today, I'm here as the new chair of the Business Development Board of Martin County. I just wanted to say how grateful I am to be here and how grateful we are of the partnership that we have with Martin County. It's been an interesting 2020, I think, for all of us, but I'm so proud of the Business Development Board and Joan Goodrich in particular of just how we were able to quickly pivot and really help the businesses in Martin County. So today, I'm going to hand it over to Joan, and she's going to walk through the 2020 annual report, and I hope you're as excited as I am at just the progress that we've made. So thank you.
Nice to see
Great.
you in person.
Thank you, Kate.
I know,
Absolutely.
in person.
Thank you so much, Kate, for joining today. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Commissioners, Administration, and members of the public. It is my pleasure to give you our first annual briefing with our new multi-year contract that we had put in place. And I'd like to begin with just a ginormous thank you to you for your leadership, your support, the initiatives, and in particular to the members of your team, Ms. Krista, Mr. George Stokas, who continues to be our inside person on all matters economic development. We've enjoyed collaborating with growth management, with Paul's team, with the CRAs, with Susan's team, Narissa in tourism and marketing and her team, MCTV with Bob and his team, the airport team, and many others throughout your organization. Because again, we do believe a stronger economy is everyone's business. In today's briefing, there we go. Thank you, George. Thank you, George. I'll give you just some insight in what we did in 2020, but you also have received our FY 2020 annual audit financial statements already have been presented to you, each of you, along with our annual 990 tax returns, which is part of our agreement together. Again, I mentioned that we're so pleased that we've got this multi-year agreement in place to deliver economic development services to our community. Again, core business for us is simply starting, scaling, keeping, and welcoming new business and industry to Martin County. So in 2020, along with your team, we thought out of the box. We really tried to meet the needs of the community. And an example in some of the highlights I'd like to just point out. We were very proud of the We're Ready video series that we had did with our local businesses who needed help in letting the community know that they were reopened, in particular after some of the governor's orders were lifted. We took an example of the We're Ready video series from our economic partners at the City of Stewart and then took that county-wide. Those videos then were used by our small business owners on their own social media platforms. We also created and started what we called Small Talk, which was a new online series to help local business owners and executives with their tactical and strategic decisions. As you'll think back, things were changing so quickly. We were open, we were not open, and all of the questions that came along with it. There was the PPP money and EIDL and the alphabet soup of some of the ways that all levels of government were trying to help businesses as we were going through this. So Small Talk was something new that we tried and did. Additionally, it was important to us to tell some of the extraordinary stories of ingenuity of how many of our businesses were trying to help our community through the early days of the pandemic. So the Stories of Triumph was a new storytelling series that we put together and highlighting just what some of these companies were doing in order to really build that sense of community, buying local, supporting local, and coming together locally in order to help our community through this. Additionally, there we go, this way. Just prior to the pandemic coming in, we actually set a new table at the Business Development Board in which we welcomed all of the partners that were doing the work of economic development, community development, workforce development, and other aspects of the work of economic development. We had built a table that is 30 plus strong. And so when we went into the pandemic, we turned that into the Martin County Biz Team. And there was just a flurry of referrals going back and forth between all of these partners as we were seeking to help our businesses through this pandemic. Of course, this was in addition to what your own team was doing to help our businesses through this. And again, I'd like to publicly thank George and the Martin County extraordinary A-team that you put in place to bring that CARES Act money down from Washington and to get that into our community as quickly and efficiently as you did. $5 million going to 400 local businesses that we saved those jobs, you kept those doors open, and some of the investment that you're making also in the COVID-19 economic study and some of the information that you'll see come to you in the next couple of months through George's office. You will see that data and information, and like I said, it's because you pivoted too with us in the community. Again, I mentioned the Partner Council, which we finally called the Martin County Biz Team. We were going from, quarterly meetings in COVID, weekly calls, and now we're back to bi-monthly meetings. In fact, our next meeting is on Friday, March 5th. Again, some of the numbers, just in particular, so in addition to some of that response and recovery work that we did, we also were continuing to do the core business of economic development. So in fiscal year 2020, we did make 5 economic development announcements that had a job impact of 48 jobs, 95,000 square feet of office, commercial, industrial space with a CapEx capital investment of $4.9 million. We answered the hotline inquiries of almost 1,000 businesses. We actually did conduct some in-person visits along with using the virtual technology to continue our one-on-one businesses with owners. We do represent and serve as the administrator for the Martin County Industrial Development Authority. And also during this period of time, we did some refinancing of the Jensen Beach Healthcare Facility. We also worked with your team and our economic partners to educate the voters on the voter referendum relating to the economic development ad valorem tax exemption tool. And we were very pleased when the voters said yes to that tool by 63%. And if that wasn't enough, we also did conduct some new roundtables, a commercial real estate banking finance roundtable. We did a roundtable with the marine industry, along with a future of work and learning roundtable. Again, those roundtables are important because it allows us to keep a pulse on how business and industry is moving in our community. Some recent announcements that we've made in the new fiscal year, we did recruit Grindhard Ammo to our community with 20 jobs of impact, 25,000 square feet, and $20 million of capital investment. This is also a group that is looking to make additional investment in our community. Thanks to some of the decisions that you made, Tribute Performance Boats is also relocating to Martin County. Ebersol Boats is a homegrown marine business that actually went through our latest cohort of the Business Accelerator program, and they're growing fast. And our most recent announcement or relocation is Aqualogics coming up from South Florida. Again, you'll notice some of these numbers are small, and they may be smaller than some of our neighbors as they make their announcements. Personally, I take a lot of point of pride in helping businesses of all sizes start, stay, grow, and come to Martin County. So we'll take them all, large or small. Our prospect pipeline is very robust. In fact, we're working with 31 other businesses and their representatives to make potential investment here in Martin County. And that would have a job impact of about 1,500 new jobs, would impact 1.9 million square feet of office, industrial, commercial flex space, and with a CapEx of $119 million. Wouldn't that be great that I come back in a few months with some of those numbers? Additionally, our board of directors has looked at some other strategic initiatives tied to the work that we do. The board of directors has green-lighted what we're calling Propel MC, some of our new work around advancing entrepreneurship. So during this past 12 months, we did complete our assessment and asset mapping of our entrepreneurial ecosystem, and we now have a 9-point plan to advance our work around entrepreneurship, in particular with some of the startups in our area. Another important item for the work that we do in conjunction with other partners is bridging that gap between talent and jobs. Many of our businesses would grow faster if they could just identify great talent here in Martin County to grow their businesses. So one of the creative things that we tried right before the holidays was a new radio campaign with Coast 101.3 that actually resulted in 6 placements. of talent into our local businesses. And coming up on April 15th, we are supporting an in-person job fair with our partners here in Martin County with the City of Stuart and Career Source Research Coast. So that'll be an in-person job fair that we do at the Stuart Public Safety building. Right now we've got 23 employers that are bringing those job opportunities, and I know your team is also participating in that. So other things coming down the pike, the other important component to our business plan for fiscal year 2021 was the green lighting of what we're calling our Hubs of Excellence marketing and branding strategy. It's really kind of the last component to our core business and how we're going to tell the story, beginning inside the market and expanding out. So telling that fabulous Martin County story from the perspective of our key industries of aviation, marine, clean and green, life sciences, medical, and healthcare. And with some of the recommendations that we anticipate coming from the COVID-19 economic study, we anticipate one or two other industry perspectives that will join this new marketing strategy. So this is designed to share what Martin County is, a great place to do life, work, and business. I'm talking fast, George, I know. So part of the marketing plan and the challenge just from a reality point of view is Martin County knows what it does not want to be. We don't want to be overdeveloped, we don't want to be overcrowded, and we don't want to be overexposed. Unfortunately, that's been interpreted by some in our community and certainly some in the marketplace that we are anti-business. We all know here in this room, Martin County is not anti-business. And so with our new brand mantra of distinctive by design, we're actually going to lead into the sentiment. We're going to emphasize it as a strength with this new marketing campaign, and we are just going to be very proud of what is important to us, that we're going to be good stewards of our natural resources, that we know the qualities and the types of business categories that we'd love to nurture because of their good jobs, because of the capital investment and tax base that they can bring. We're going to remain steadfast in the quality and top-notch services that we provide, and all of that is supported by our unique lifestyle. So Martin County Distinctive by Design is the brand. The marketing campaign is what we're going to call MC 360 Degrees, a better life from every angle. And, you know, some of the personality and image attributes that we look forward to bringing forward, I know that was kind of not as, we are going to bring forward, include conscientious, that we're caring. We have a relaxed vibe. We're imaginative as we do our problem solving. We have confidence and we're interconnected. So, you know, this is some of what we have heard from those that we have spoken to, and thank you for taking time with me to try and help get some of those words the best that fit us here in Martin County. Our targeted audiences for Martin County 360 Degrees will be, as you'd expect, business owners, executives, entrepreneurs. But we're also layering in young adults, young professionals, graduates, influencers, and residents. And why is that? Well, we believe that we're going to be sustainable in our marketing efforts moving forward if we re-believe in ourselves as Martin County. So this inside outward way of doing marketing is what we're going to do. You see here in front of you on this particular slide is just that cross-platformness to our efforts. This will be the first time that we've really handled it this way, and some of it is because of the beautiful technology that's available now to marketers. We are going to start with TV and video, and then we'll transition that into a very robust website, because that's where a lot of people will take that information and learn. We're going to leverage our owned media, digital social media, collateral, and targeted outreach. And we're going to start all of this work immediately. I mentioned TV and video is at the top of this platform chart because this is where we believe we can get the most robust centerpiece showcase for the original content that we want to develop, and with your team. Your administrative team has been very gracious in allowing us some time to spend with the MCTV team and your communications group. And we've come up with a 5-show series called Martinomics. And we're going to take each of our hubs of excellence and really build this original content. It'll be a show of about 13 to 17 minutes long, and it will allow us to go deep on each of our hubs of excellence. We'll have several co-hosts that will allow us to get out into the field. We'll look at the numbers for the data nerds like myself who love to know what the numbers are. We'll look at lifestyle, we'll look at talent, and we'll look at these industries from beyond the bottom line to talk about the generosity of so many of our businesses in making Martin County special. So that is just a quick review of where we've been, where we're at, and where we're headed. I'll only additionally mention that other third quarter activities will include, we're building our new cohort for the Business Accelerator program, which will begin April 5th. So if you know of any business owners that would like to be in this spring cohort, please let me know. We'll be hosting our next commercial real estate banking and finance roundtable with your team. We'll be doing our first ever IT roundtable. We continue to support George and the team on the economic study. And lastly, you will have our fiscal year 2022 business plan and budget by the end of May. And that concludes our report from the Business Development Board. Thank you.
Great.
Great job.
Wonderful job.
Right.
Commissioner Smith.
So can I ask a couple questions? Just curious. So at the point where you are in the marketing strategy plan, is it past the point of changing any of it? Or is it all cast, is it done?
No, it's not done. We're just beginning. The board did green light the marketing strategy at this point. We've allocated funding for.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Like on the wording and the phrases, and is that
Oh,
stuff
no, that's all still, yeah,
fluid?
fluid. Yes, sir.
Okay, so just a couple suggestions. And on all of the slogans, all of the wording, did you do any testing on it? Like, did you hire a marketing polling research company to see how people react to what the phrases and slogans are?
No, we haven't done that yet. That'll
Okay.
be part of some of the
Something
discovery
I
work
would
that we'll do.
something I would recommend. I mean, there are bits and pieces of it I like a lot. I think and I'll go through some of them just for some ideas, because people hear things differently than what other people hear. So when you see them, hear them, what do they mean to you? And if it wasn't in any other context and you're only getting one bite at the apple in terms of what you're seeing, you might get a very different reaction than what you think the words are saying. The first thing that caught my eye, aviation, the word aviation that you used in about the third or fourth space of one of the centers of excellence or the nodes.
Of excellence, yeah.
I would use aerospace instead of aviation. Aviation, to me, sounds like airplanes taking off at an airport. Aerospace is more the design, the engineering, the entire industry of aerospace that we have in Martin County as a term. And so if I'm a marketing person, I'm looking at that term. If it's aviation and I have an aerospace industry, okay, they got an airport, they got airplanes, maybe this isn't my place that I want to go. That's what that says to me. So aerospace says one thing to me, aviation says another. Okay? The distinctive by design. I like the phrase, generally speaking, but I don't know that it says anything about job creation or economic development. I think it's a great small bite, distinctive by design. I like that. That could apply to almost any kind of architectural, any kind of clothing line. That's what it struck me as when I hear that. So it doesn't speak to what are we trying to achieve relative to job creation or economic development, just as a thought. And those are some of the things I would test out there to see how other people in the industry hear that and see that, and what do they get from that. It's not so much what we, the five of us, or the two of you down there, or three of you, get. What does our audience hear when they see it? The last one, the last comment I have, I really like the Martin 360, a better life by design. Again, I don't, this is going to sound awful and I don't want it to. That sounds like something the Villages would use. Like, it's like a residential slogan that it's a wonderful lifestyle, and it is. I mean, we have this wonderful lifestyle. But if you're trying to set the tone and the message for job creation or economic development or further enhancing our what we have here, I think you could add something else in there than the word by design that somehow relates towards job creation and economic development. I love the phrase. I think it's great. When you hear it, I get a whole different thought process as to what it means. And I think from our audience that you're trying to say, ooh, Martin County is open for business. I don't know that says that. If that's the direction you want it to go, we want to send the message that regardless of what you've heard about Martin County in the past, we by all means are open for business, and we're selective, and we are good at certain things. We do things very, very well in this county, but we still are open for business. And so if we want to attract aerospace, clean energy, if we want to attract marine industries and so on, how do we speak to that industry that says, oh, okay, that's a place where I want to move my company or grow my company or do something? Is that helpful? But I would,
for that feedback.
whatever you do with it, I would really highly recommend. I mean, Narissa has 3 or 4 companies that are incredibly talented at researching information and digging much deeper into what we would ever get access to, generally speaking. There may be something they can do for you that says, look, we can tap into this contract, we can do some polling, and we can do some referencing information to find out how people receive that.
That's a great suggestion.
Thank you.
Commissioner.
Appreciate it.
I was just going to add in your presentation, and you just kind of touched on, but the earned media, I didn't see it in there, but perhaps it's integrated within your marketing. If you remember back when tourism did the presentation, the return on investment is absolutely phenomenal. And when I say earned media, I'm talking about industry and trade type publications, within these targeted industries. And earned media is certainly a skill set and a talent to get that coverage, but the return on investment is so huge. So I wouldn't want to see you give up on earned media. And that was my.
And that was exactly the company you're talking about, is exactly the tap into Narissa and the folks that she's working with. It may not be applicable, but I think if it's not, they would certainly know the direction to go in to say, we don't do that specific kind of thing, but these guys do, and they're really good at it. And, with with COVID money and other ways of looking at what we're looking at, this might even be something, George, in the contract that we have with the group that's kind of what happened to us because of COVID. That may even be something we can work into their work program as a work order to help us with, if that's applicable with them. Anyway, thank you.
Great job. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to, let me see what time it is. What time do we normally take the closed captioning? 3?
Be 1:30, 2:33. Be around 3 o'clock.
Okay.
You can take it whenever you want.
Yeah, let's go ahead and take our closed captioning break now for 10 minutes, and then we'll resume with departmental number 5.
You're on.
Unless you're trying to win an award or something.
You're on.
You make me look like Harold Jenkins.
Okay.
agree, I'm sorry.
Plus, the chair doesn't have control
Okay,
of the meeting.
welcome back to our March 23rd meeting, Board of County Commissioners meeting, and we are going to resume this afternoon with Departmental Number 5, Interactive Growth Model, presentation of 6 planning scenarios.
Where are the models?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Clyde Doolin with the Growth Management Department. With me is Samantha Lovelady, Principal Planner. We're going to try and go through a very dry and boring subject that's confusing and complicated, but we'll try to make it as painless as possible. So if you have questions.
You got us on the edge of our seats.
Okay.
I actually find it exciting.
Oh, there you go.
This is an interactive growth model, and we presented to you in December the first run on the data. What we're going to talk about now is some of the variables that can be changed and the information that we can get from it. It's a tool for quantifying impacts from different development types. It can be applied inside and outside the urban service districts. And instead of treating just residential or just commercial, as we do with our commercial inventory analysis and things like that, this can look at multiple things all at once and how they interact with each other. It's about quality of life. We have a great quality of life in Martin County with our wetlands and our upland habitat and our beautiful community. But this is also about the quality of life that goes into the cost of driving to schools and having services delivered to our homes. It's much more popular today to have delivery from Amazon and so on like that. And then the cost for the Board of County Commissioners to provide services to citizens. So we're going to look at 3 scenarios. First of all, they affect, and we're going to look at the effects on 2 public services and a commercial grocery store, which were modeled by Metro Forecasting. We're going to look at the area where Pineland or Newfield is located today. It's a 3,400 acre piece of property. As you know, it was approved with the future land use map and text amendments will permit 4,200 units and 2,250,000 square feet of non-residential. We're not going to get into that much complexity. Instead, we're just going to do a baseline scenario on this property and assume 4,300 units and just a grocery store. And we'll be looking at the impacts on public facilities. So the baseline will be compared to a lower density ag ranchette, 1 unit per 5 acres, which was previously on the property before the future land use map amendment was done. And we're going to assume a set of 2.4 persons per household and a 17% vacancy rate for the baseline and for the next 2 variables or scenarios that we're going to look at. So if you look at them side by side, the difference is 580 units versus 4,300 units. A population of 1,180 versus 8,729. And you can see that the lower density, the 1 unit per 5, doesn't have enough market share to support a grocery or a school or a fire station. So you would have to have those facilities in another place and send and travel back and forth between the residential units. The baseline comes much closer to supporting those things. You have 60% of the population necessary for a grocery, 50% for an elementary school, and 65% of the population needed for an EMS. So the result is, if you keep a density like this, and really it's not the density, it's the population that's being served, that's our focus here, is you don't have enough population, even if you were to add in Palm City Farms, Canopy Creek, Stewart West, Cobblestone, and that surrounding area, you still wouldn't have enough to support locating those kind of facilities there west of the turnpike. It results in students and residents making longer trips east of the turnpike for a lot of their services. Government services have to come from the east side of the turnpike west to those properties. And it increases the cost per capita for both the citizens who have to drive the distance and the government services that have to be driven out to them. The next comparison we're going to make to the baseline is a scenario of 2 units per acre on that same 3,400 acres. Assume still the same 2.4 persons per house and a 17% vacancy rate. Here, you see the numbers go up. 5,800 versus 4,300 units, 11,759 versus 8,729. Same average persons per household. And now you have 81% of the persons you need to support a grocery, 67% for the schools, and 87% for the fire EMS, compared to these other percentages over here for the baseline. Now, this isn't to say one type is better than the other. It's just to show how the tool can be used to identify impacts when you make decisions. And when you model versus inside our existing urban service districts, or if you have to model an expansion to our urban service districts. So the impacts of having the 2 units per acre versus the baseline, you have a comparable number of vehicle trips going east to over the turnpike, and you have both have a sufficient population to support certain services on the west side of the turnpike. The 2 dwelling units per acre has a decreased cost per capita to provide some governmental services because you can locate them there east of the turnpike with it. And this is just a chart that shows all 3 side by side with each other. Units, support necessary persons to support the different facilities. And you can see how being able to model these different densities, you can get an idea of what kind of services you're going to have to put in your capital improvements planning and your budgeting over the long term. It's a substantial difference between the 1 unit per 5 and either the baseline or the 2 units per acre. And these are just 3 of the services that can be modeled with this kind of a program. You can also look at other things like stormwater and parks and so on. This is an independent third-party data. It's not something generated by staff, and it can help you with your long-term policy decisions. The next thing we're going to look at is changing the demographics and holding the number of units constant on the same area. In the demographics, we look at persons per household because it changes the different types of services that are needed, and we look at the vacancy rate. If you have a lot of retirees, you're not going to need as much school, for example. So again, the baseline is the same as we were discussing in the last few slides. If you have 1.9 persons per household and an 18% vacancy rate, assuming that you have a fair number of people who go north every summer, you've only 47% of the need for a grocery, 21% for the schools, and 51% needed for EMS. But look at what happens if you bump the demo up to 2.7 persons per household and reduce the vacancy rate. Notice we're talking 4,300 units in each of these different scenarios. Now all of a sudden you have 74% of the need for a grocery, 172% of the need for a school, and 81% of the need for fire EMS. Sorry?
I'd like to point out that the demographic high that you're looking at would represent a majority being families. So that's why your persons per household would be up, unless your vacancy rate would be lower, because families stay in place and there's more persons per household. It's not just an arbitrary jump in those numbers. It's representative of families, just like the low is representative of retirees and snowbirds.
Now, typically when we do residential capacity analysis and we do other types of analysis, we just assume a set persons per household across the entire area. But the interactive growth model can do much more granular analysis that gets into these details of persons per household, right down to a traffic analysis zone. So you can be modeling the persons per household in every different section of Martin County and get much more specific about predicting and projecting what your impacts on public facilities are going to be, and it's going to be variable not just because of the number of units per acre, but variable because of the number of persons per household, for instance. And so it gets you far beyond this debate of more units, more density, less density. So in comparing families to the snowbirds, approximately 2,000 more residents when you have the larger persons per household or than the baseline, and about 2,000 fewer residents. You have an increased demand for essential services with the families, reduced demand for with the snowbird population. And if you have the persons to support the commercial development, you're going to have fewer trips outside that 3,400 acre area, and you're going to have shorter trips to and from the commercial that is provided. Whereas if you don't have the population to support the commercial there within the area, you're going to have longer trips and more congestion driving to and from. So the first few slides compared the different number of units while holding the demographics constant. The latter slides held the number of units constant while changing the demographics. It's important to note this is not just for plan amendments and for choosing to expand, when and if you expand densities or urban service districts or what have you. It allows you to document changes going on inside your urban service district and tune and make policy decisions upon locating your residential and commercial closer or farther apart, and when and where to locate public services like fire stations. So the next, no, that's still some more summary. And I just covered some of that as far as reduced trip lengths and need for public services. It's good for existing uses, not just for proposed changes in policy. And as I said before, fire, EMS, and schools are just 3 examples of the public services that can be modeled and analyzed. Utilities, stormwater, roads, parks, among others, can be considered. So, moving off of that geographic location west of the Turnpike, we're going to move to the Treasure Coast Square Mall and look at the other models. But before I do that, do you have any questions?
I just have a quick question. Because you keep talking about providing services, when you talk about providing services, are you assuming that we're providing the level of service is what we've outlined in the comp plan as far as this is our level of service for transportation? So you're assuming the level of service that was outlined in the comp plan?
Yes, and we're looking at, you're going to be looking at, and you do have to look at whenever you do your CIP and your budgeting, where and when to provide and how to make decisions about what facilities to provide and where. And this gives you additional data upon which to base some of those decisions and to maintain those levels of service that are in the comprehensive plan, yes.
Okay, but they're based on what is currently outlined in the comp plan. So if we require a level of service for this particular roadway, that's what these are based on. Even though a resident might debate, like, okay, well, just say fire rescue, maybe that's an easier. A resident might debate, like, their level of service is a response time, but those level of services are outlined in the comp plan. Do you follow?
I think I do, but I think Mr. Donaldson can probably address this better than I.
Yeah, Don Donaldson, Deputy County Administrator. Commissioner, you're absolutely right. It does take, the output would be based upon your current adopted level of service, whether it was rural or urban for that particular unit. Fire rescue as an example. You could also use it to look at modeling existing conditions if your demographic changed and you wanted to predict how that would affect your current level of service. Conversely, you could also say, you know what, our current level of service for roads is D. What if we make it a lower level of service? You know, what would that, if you changed your level of service, for instance, you could use this model to help tie in with traffic, for instance, to determine what would the impact be for your roads and things. So it can go in both directions, if you will, but it will, right now, all the results are geared towards the current level of service. The other thing I think that Clyde pointed out was taking the existing demographics. As the consultant, the first thing he does is try to pick a demographic that's indicative of the area where the development is going. For instance, if you had something in Hope Sound, you would be looking at the surrounding demographics and trying to predict what the new development's demographics would be based upon the surrounding area. So instead of having some blanket number throughout the county, we would be trying to bring to you what our estimated impact of this density or development is based upon the characteristics of the surrounding community. Commissioner Smith brought up one earlier today about, the sidewalks in that area. So we could give you an idea that based upon Leilani Heights and other areas and those zip codes from the census data, the likely inhabitant would be X. And that's how we would present it. But you could also bring forward a low and a high as they described as, if we're wrong, this is what it would look like in either direction.
Okay, thank you.
So the next scenarios that we're going to discuss are really an outside-the-box type of look at planning. We look at the Church of Coast Square Mall, and we look at what would happen if, by chance, you were to add 400 units or add 800 units, and then test the impacts on the population, school, and commercial demand, like in the other scenarios, and to see how much of an impact, or would it be a detrimental impact, perhaps, on the area. So if you repurpose the commercial buildings and add some units, 400 units would result in 935 persons. The baseline here is the average number of is the number of units in that traffic analysis zone which the mall is already located in, and the 802 is the population that's already there. And then if you add the 400 units, you see that bumps up to 1737, and you see the need for commercial to support it is only a 12% bump, and it's only a 6% bump on school population. So you've got plenty of commercial already in that area, and you've already got schools in that area. So they really, adding units in a location like that doesn't have a detrimental impact on public facilities in that area. And it also would reduce perhaps the trip generation, because the 400 units and the people in those 400 units would be closer to facilities already there. Likewise, if you bump up add 800 units to the mall property, just as an example, you'd be bumping up to 2673, and you'd only be increasing your percentages to 18% for commercial demand for grocery, and you'd only be increasing your school demand by 9%. So it really wouldn't be a terrible impact on those folks in that area, and it would actually put units in close proximity to services that are already there. And I won't read this to you because I think I've already covered some of it in the description, but we definitely think it would help bolster demand for commercial space in a location like that. It puts people within 1 to 3 miles of services. You already have the school sites close by. And if you put multifamily in a location like this, it would not tend to be as much of a change in terms of intensity, because you already have that commercial development, you already have the parking, you already have a lot of facilities there available. So as a result of, shifts in population and changes to our urban service district like Newfield, you're going to have residents who are not going to be as interested in traveling east for necessities to the mall. I mean, it's a long haul if you're going to go from Newfield east, then north to the Church of Coast Square Mall, and you're going to have potentially a decreasing population that the mall serves, and it increases your trip length, and so it makes sense to start analyzing where we have our commercial and where we have our residential, and putting them in proximity to each other to shorten trips. So in summary, this tool can be used for monitoring changes to the existing urban areas and adapt our capital improvement planning to market changes and demographic changes, as well as to, of course, policy changes resulting in density changes. Cumulatively, it can help with long-range capital improvement planning. And that concludes our presentation. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to try and answer them.
Commissioner Smith.
I think I brought this up last time. We sort of talked about this. The Regional Planning Council has the REMI model, correct?
I don't know if they still do.
I don't either.
I know they did at one time.
And didn't Cesar have like a license to be able to do that as well? What I would really like to see, because I remember sitting through at least 2 statewide presentations on that and what that tool was going to be able to do for Florida, if anybody actually used it, is not dissimilar to this. And I know this is a 1,000-foot view of this, and you could probably drill down to 100 feet, probably. But I know that was an amazing, powerful tool at one time that really analyzed if you're going to do a housing development of 400 units, and the board said, look, we want 100 of them to be affordable housing, and the other 300 can be market value, whatever they were. Everything that happened as a result of moving those numbers would spit out everything that was going to happen relative to that development, to all of your, not only your infrastructure, your social services, your hospital use, everything. So if there was going to be a percentage that, all of a sudden by 400 homes, the need for a hospital bed throughout the course of the year goes up by 1 or 2%, or whatever that was, so that you really knew ultimately what the impacts were by approving a development like that. And you could make that decision. I mean, you could make that, as this sort of is alluding to that it would do. I'd be just curious to check in with them to find out if they still have that, if they still have anybody over there that operates it or can operate it. And I'd be interested to take the same scenarios that you've run and run it through there if they still have it, and see what it spits out for information versus what this can spit out. Because if we already have the model, if we already own licensing for that sort of thing, and I think we used to pay that licensing fee, maybe we don't anymore because Cesar's not. I'd just be curious just to know.
Check.
This is almost like one of those classic things, like you do this amazing study 15 years ago and you put the book on the shelf, and 15 years goes by and you forget that you did the study and you go do another one.
I haven't heard of Treasure Coast using it at all.
I haven't either, but if it's a program, or if it's still an active program and they still have a license to use it, no one uses it, because maybe at the end of the day it's just completely impractical, because as with every sort of development order that comes to us, it's not like it's a development order that's looking at the whole pie and says, hey, here's the picture of what Martin County wants to look like in 20 years, and here's where this piece of pie fits in that piece over the next 20 years. I mean, I think that's the problem with comprehensive planning, honestly. There was never like a picture vision as to where you wanted to be in 20 or 30 years and what it actually looked like. We get a parcel that comes to us. It meets the comprehensive plan amendment or comprehensive plan requirements. It meets land development regulations. You all give us a recommendation for approval because it's gone through all the checklists and you've done 2 years worth of work on it, and we approve it. Right? It doesn't really, though, say, well, what if it went this way versus that way? And the developer, quite frankly, who bought it or has a contract on it, doesn't want to go this way. They want to go this way because that's what they built or that's what they do. And because that picture doesn't exist and it doesn't say, this is where we wanted things to happen, we get sometimes this hodgepodge of stuff that happens. And then you kind of look back after 20 years and you go, was there a strategy? Anyway. Thanks.
Paul, you have your light on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Paul Schilling, Growth Management Director. Commissioner, to your point, we do have the development review process, as you know. We have people that are looking at all those elements with respect to the school board, the fire marshal, utilities. So we have that process. What you're alluding to, I'm not aware of. However, we'd be happy to look into it.
I just, if it's a tool and it still exists, and we've already invested a lot of money at the state level to have it, why not use it?
I'll check into it.
But thanks.
Great. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Thank
And
you
this
very
was
much.
just, it's a lot of information in there.
We tried to boil it down a bit.
Madam
It wasn't as boring as you promoted it to be.
No, you did it with enthusiasm.
Sorry, Commissioner, one closing comment was, I think what's unique about this particular element is taking the census data down to a very small level in your particular community and updating that census data along with new development as it comes in and understanding what that new development is. So it's supposed to be more customized, I guess, to, in this case, Martin County and what's happening in your county at that time. And it also is designed to tie in with your long-range transportation plan and using the TAZs and that sort of thing, so that when you do your long-range transportation planning on the MPO, this could be tied in directly with helping to feed that. The two would work together, and that's really, I think, its best strategy and able to do on small-scale viewpoints. When you're started looking at those larger regional components, you still have to rely on your planners and your experts to kind of guide you on whether it makes sense. So that's all I just wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to departmental number 6, summary of the resilience programs, sea level rise report by Kathy Fitzpatrick.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Kathy Fitzpatrick, Coastal Engineer for the record. And under here, I'm smiling. I'm happy to be here today to both acknowledge the completion and the submittal of the Resilient Martin Sea Level Rise Report and to present some recommendations to continue moving the county's resilience efforts forward. Donna, where's the PowerPoint? Sorry.
She'll find it.
Well, anyway, I've been before you before to discuss this. And in my previous presentation on the draft report, the sea level rise report focuses on the sea level rise projections and the expected impact in specific sectors.
Kathy, can you get a little closer to the mic, please?
Yep. Ah, there we are. Okay. In specific sectors like stormwater management, utilities, and roads, as well as implications for our economy if these conditions are left unaddressed. Something that was beyond the scope of this report, but is well documented in the literature, is the threat to shoreline stability and ecosystems posed by rising water. For the vulnerability analysis that is the focus of the report, we use the condition presented by the projected 2070 water levels developed using the NOAA Intermediate High Projection. We've developed multiple map series showing impacts to various types of infrastructure throughout the county, as shown in the image on the right. The analysis considers the fact that infrastructure may stop functioning before the water bodies flood into the community, as is shown in the image on the left. A link to these maps is contained in the report. The report also summarizes impacts to the economy and the economic payback of addressing problematic conditions now, before they become major issues, with the resulting increase in economic impact that compound those damages. Our Resilient Martin website links to the tool you see here, where individuals can change parameters and see how that affects outcomes. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, has a coastal flood exposure mapper tool, and that's featured on the Resilient Martin webpage. Anyone can look at threats posed by varying levels of king tides, storm surge, and sea level rise, and then see the extent of exposure that results to society, infrastructure, and ecosystems. We also have a link on the Resilience webpage to the county's flood zone maps and the county's storm surge maps. But at the end of the day, the point is to lay out a strategic path forward. We not only need design criteria, we need a way to systematically prioritize projects and have the supporting legal framework in place. And then, of course, all we need is the funding to make it happen. Here you see some elements that are featured on the Resilience webpage. And as you can see at the top right, the Sea Level Rise report is already available to the public. And this is an image that you saw in my last resilience presentation as well. The areas outlined in red are the 13 priority areas that were identified in the report, each one either having multiple sectors that are impacted all at once or just really extreme flooding issues. It should be noted that the beaches along the Atlantic Ocean are not identified here because we have a strong and ongoing established shoreline maintenance program that provides good storm protection value. And just to remind you, these are some of the conditions we're experiencing as recently as last fall. And they're indicative of routine conditions we will expect to see many days at any high tide in 25 or 30 years. Of course, that means something as simple as a king tide can come in on top of this, and storm surges, which could happen simultaneously, will just layer on to create more destruction. The problems we're seeing are not only limited to simple flooding on land. Increased water levels are also accelerating erosion along the shoreline, resulting in lost habitat and threats to upland structures. So, what's next? This again is something that you saw in my last presentation. We developed 48 recommendations in this report. And these recommendations, we looked at 4 main areas. We looked at assets and infrastructure, land development strategies, our natural resources, and socioeconomic impacts. Not surprisingly, the majority of the report's recommendations focused on infrastructure, since that's what keeps the county running and also impacts most other sectors. And so, the recommendations included in this agenda item will start us on the path to implementing many of those recommendations from the report I just mentioned, and also better position the county for a resilient future. Those recommendations are: initiate the development of guidance documents for adaptation action strategies that include, but are not limited to, develop engineering standards for resilient project development, assess the viability of exfiltration trench soil storage as water levels rise, design criteria for living shorelines and seawalls, develop a methodology to determine expected impacts to stormwater management as groundwater levels change. 2, initiate amendment or amendments to the Comprehensive Growth Management Plan to improve resilience with emphasis on the shoreline protection zone. 3, include a resilience review for the future capital improvement projects that fall within the vulnerable areas as depicted in the Sea Level Rise report, using criteria that includes resilient engineering standards as they become available. And last, approve the resolution to initiate text amendments to the Comprehensive Growth Management Plan. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay. No questions? Commissioner Hurd.
So the first difficult questions are going to be, how do we prioritize? What do we prioritize? How do we fund? So there are 13 priority areas, is that correct?
Yes.
What are your initial feelings about how we're going to prioritize funding, making those infrastructure improvements?
That's an excellent question, and actually, right now, we have two fairly small projects that we're looking at as pilot projects at the south end of the county, areas that are well known for flooding. And one of the things that I've been pushing the consultants to do mimics something that we saw happen in the Keys when they developed their program. And it's something that you guys can use as a tool to make these decisions, because it's not really going to be black and white. So what I want to get out of this is something that will give you all the feeling for what the costs are going to be, for how much benefit, for how long. Because do you want dry tires for the next 50 years? That's going to cost a lot, but you all need to have some idea what that is. And then we need to look at logical, is it 15 days of 2 inches of water or what? And I think those are the kinds of things that we really need to get into so that we can start to come to the answers that you're talking about. I mean, we can, there's some easy things like this. The worst flooding places really need to have a hard look taken at them, but we have different aspects that are influencing the flooding that we're seeing in different areas, and we need to continue to look at it. But I think that if we can get more of these manageable size priority pilot projects so that we can begin to ask these questions and find out what the answers are, because the last thing that we want to do, which I learned from the Keys, is to just go in and say, this is what we're going to do, because the minute we do something, we're setting a precedent, we're establishing something. So we really need to look at these as pilot programs so that we can learn and possibly not get it 100% right the first time, but figure that out.
Well, also in the Keys, they have a much more critical question to ask, and that is, what are we going to save and what are we not going to save? Because they can't save everything. The sea level rise there is going to be too widespread for them to be able to save things, to save everything. So at some point, and hopefully it's 100 years down the road, we won't be faced with those terrible options, but we're going to have to think about it, short term, medium term. We're going to have to be thinking about prioritizing what in the county is the most important things to save.
And also think about how we can design projects so they can be modified.
Yeah.
Expecting change to come and building those projects so that they can be modified to the next time that there needs to be a repair or something to it, that we can look at it that way. But one thing about the Keys that is interesting, and we do have in common in some areas, is their right-of-way issue, right? Because as you raise the road, you need more land, and obviously they've got that in spades down there. So we can learn from that for sure, and use that as we're going forward.
And also, land use planning is going to be more important than ever in the future. We need to make sure that we know exactly where our water tables are and how prone to flooding we are when we consider expansion of the urban service boundary at any time.
Right. And the interesting thing right now is that the Water Management District and USGS are doing some really big projects that are going to be concluded, I think, in about a year and a half, and they'll really set the stage for us to start looking in earnest at things like groundwater changes and those things that you're talking about, because, that's going to be a big... If we can't use gravity to get rid of the water and we can't get it down through the land, we need to figure out what's going to happen.
Thanks.
Jim, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, Jim Gordon for the record. We do have 2 pilot projects that the board approved last year in the CIP. One's on Merritt Way in South County and one's on Mockingbird Lane in Palm City. And those 2 projects are in design right now. We haven't funded construction because we really have to understand what it's going to look like. But it is going to position ourselves for grants, and there's a lot of grant money out there for sea level rise and resiliency. So if we have shovel-ready projects, which these 2 will be after design's complete, we'll be in much better standing than other communities for those grants.
Great. Commissioner Smith.
So Kathy, I wasn't here when we first started talking about stormwater and STAs and water quality treatment areas. That came in just a little bit before I got here. But the way you presented it and the way you're talking about it kind of strikes me as that's the same conversation. I don't think any of us ever knew 25 years ago where we would be today relative to what we're doing with stormwater and what we're doing with STAs, and then, you know, the much bigger picture of Everglades restoration and all that kind of stuff. And so much is, I wouldn't say has changed, but we have adapted as we have moved along. As you were talking about it and describing to it, that's what it sounded like to me. I mean, you've generally, not generally, you've very much started to lay out where our issue, where they start to lie, where we think our biggest challenges are. So I think on the policy side of this thing, it's sort of like stormwater and how we would prioritize or how we would set ourselves up for moving forward in the future. That I guess identifying what you've done, kind of solidifying that in a strategy that probably ought to end up in the comp plan, so that when we go for grants, we can point back to land development regulations, we can point back to the comp plan. We can also point to the CIP, that these things were all lined up with a very progressive measure in terms of how we will compete against others for those funds. Because somebody said, oh, well, I've got a problem in this neighborhood, so I want to go to the legislature and ask for $10 million to fix this neighborhood. We may ask for $10 million from a department, but if we can show the department where all of our codes, where everything tracks back to your baseline work, we probably stand in a much better position to get funding in the future to help us do what we got to do over the long haul. So great job, great work. Just a side note, I believe that Kristen's bills are going through the House today and the Senate. I think they have one more committee to go on the Senate side, and that hopefully will become reality soon. So thank you for all that.
Thank you. Anybody else have comments? And what was the recommended action? So,
I'll do it for you if you want.
go ahead.
I would move staff's recommendation on all the initiatives that we, and these will come back, I would imagine, in pieces, because they'll all have different components to them. But this is the framework, right, for laying kind of out all the things that we'd like to see happen over a period of time. So with that, I'd move staff's recommendation.
And we need to approve the resolution as well.
And approve item 4,
Second.
which, thank you, is also in the recommendations, which approve a resolution to initiate text amendments.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Smith, seconded by Commissioner Campy. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we're moving on to departmental number 7, Martin County Neighborhood Speed Limits and Traffic Calming, presented by Luke Lambert.
There he is.
Ms. Grizzly, can you buzz Ralph and let him know that that speaker is providing a lot of feedback over here?
Which one?
Alone. It needs to be replaced.
Oh, okay.
I don't hear it.
One of them, yeah, one of them over on this side is buzzing a lot when people speak.
I'll take care of that.
Oh, you can fix it now?
Get a ladder.
I don't know what he can do for it.
Go ahead, Mr. Lambert.
Good afternoon. Again, my name is Luke Lambert. I'm the Traffic Engineering Manager for Martin County. So the Public Works Department, we field about 40 requests a year for some type of traffic calming, speed reduction, and a lot of public comment has been coming up as of late. We've had some citizens come to the board, and we just kind of wanted to clarify the whole neighborhood speed limits, how they're set, and then our traffic calming CIP sheet. So one of the first things to talk about is the intent of a speed limit. So obviously you want to improve vehicular and pedestrian safety by reducing the probability and severity of crashes. So crashes that occur at 25 miles an hour are most likely going to be property damage only crashes, and then it depends on a multitude of factors on who's involved and things like that. Speed limits, they always say, studies have shown that 85% of prudent drivers will drive the speed that they believe is necessary. So the 85th percentile comes up in a lot of studies, and I'm going to go through a couple of different methodologies that we'll discuss, and the engineering-based study is one of those particular principles that we follow currently. there is a hierarchy of roadways. This kind of just breaks it down. And one of the big things that's come out as of late from FDOT is context classification. So you have your urban arterials, and you also have rural arterials. Those differ, with their land use characteristics, and then basically the presence of pedestrians and bicyclists who are very vulnerable road users. So, as I mentioned earlier, speed limits are primarily set statutory at the state level. There's also an expert system. It's interesting, today the county engineer and myself were watching a webinar from ITE, the Institute of Traffic Engineers, and this is one of the main topics for their annual conference, so we were watching that today. The expert system in the US is called US Limits. It's basically a software where you put in some of those context classifications and it will give you a guide. And then the engineering study, that's where we go out, we take data, and we utilize the 85th percentile as kind of that guiding speed, if you will. So one of the questions we get asked is, how can I change my speed limit? Or why did you change the speed limit? And it's because the current speed doesn't meet the intent of the speed zone or the intent of the roadway. So some most recent speed limit changes have occurred on Bridge Road because of the Bridge Road Town Center project. The speed limit was reduced from 30 to 25. We reduced the speed limit on Dixie Highway recently because of that change in use. There's on-street parking now. The Map Road Town Center project is a similar thing. So those are two of the big ones that come to mind. You're really changing the characteristic of the land use around the roadway and how the roadway is intended to be used. There were some regulation changes with decreases in speed limits, so just guidance on how you step down speed limits. Bridge Road is a good one that comes to mind. Once you have those higher speeds, you need a safe distance to drop down those vehicles to get you into that lower speed once you're getting into town. And speed studies. So we've done some speed studies all throughout the county, and those are instances where we would recommend changing the speed limit. Some of the alternatives to change speed limits, you're really changing motorist behavior. So there's easy, moderate, and difficult projects. The easy ones are some of the ones we're just doing. One right now we kicked off on Skyline Drive at Sandra Drive. And so we're hoping, changing that characteristic of that intersection, lowering those traffic volumes and speeds through that roadway. Moderate ones are traffic calming. We've done a couple of projects, and community consensus is the big key there. We found it in some places easy to get consensus, in other places it's been difficult to get consensus. And then difficult roadway projects are those Bridge Road Town Center, Map Road Town Center projects. You're doing millions of dollars worth of construction work to change the characteristics of the roadway to what you want it to be. So many years ago, I think Don and Lisa, they implemented this traffic calming into the land development regulations. So it's been in the LDRs for quite some time, where they came up with this this priority ranking system, and the speeds, volumes, existing activities, and adversely affected residents are your key the key things that you want to look at and take into consideration. Furthermore, we've actually come up with a program guide, a neighborhood traffic safety program guide that we want to bring forward to the commissioners through our Public Works Administration to kind of outline the process, make a clear guide. Being that we get 40 of these a year, everyone's asking. Typical process is the request happens, there's a petition process, and then we will go out and conduct data. And we've created this guide, and we really want to make it publicly available so that everyone's clearly knowledgeable of the process and what it takes to get stuff done. And then I just wanted to highlight some of the things that are main traffic calming concerns. Right-of-way users have different needs. So in the morning time, trip purpose, you generally have those people going to work, bringing their kids to school. Then you have pedestrians and bicyclists who are sometimes leisurely, sometimes that is their commute method. And then emergency services we always consider. Delivery services are becoming more apparent on the roadways. And then maintenance services. Lots of people complain. They comment that people are speeding in the neighborhood and the trucks can't maneuver, and those maintenance services are there servicing them, so they're literally paying those people who are speeding through their neighborhoods. And then we kind of have this typical design. Commissioner Smith will notice this. We use this in Skyline Heights. If you have a typical network where you kind of have that equal traffic volumes on all roadways, and if you put some sort of traffic calming on one of them, you create this unbalanced network of traffic. Some road users will switch roadways. So the main point here is that if you're going to do some sort of traffic calming, take a holistic approach, look at the entire community, try and figure out where those impacts would go to. So it's not, everyone says, I want one speed limit or speed hump right in front of my house. It's not always that simple. So we have to think of these things. And that concludes my presentation on speed limits and traffic calming.
Great. Commissioner Campy.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lambert, thank you. I appreciate it. And I know you've been working with Ms. Wixer on these things and with the department. I think my colleagues will agree that the two issues that I hear most about from constituents are flooding or water issues, drainage, and traffic safety. You and I have a long history of working on Murphy Road with Lisa and all those other things. And I'll tell you, I like to go out and meet on site to see exactly what is going on. And then in Palm City, whether it's the larger roads like Martin Highway, which has a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit, which was put in place when Martin Highway was one lane in both directions with the yellow stripe running down the center. It is now obviously 2 lanes in both directions with a landscaped median. We have people that speed through we have Hidden Oaks Middle School and Palm City Elementary School in that little stretch there between the turnpike and the post office, and people would race through. We have at least a dozen crossing guards at each of the main intersections. There are some traffic lights. We put you guys put blinking yellow school limit 20-mile-an-hour school zone signs on the right-hand shoulder and in the median. We have the crossing guards holding like handheld stop signs, and it's still a free-for-all. But then even as we start to dial back from that into the local roads, where I'm asked to, and I'm assuming my colleagues are too, stand in people's driveways on local roads. Now, quite often, it might be the road that leads to a larger portion of the neighborhood, one way in, one way out. I'll use Dyer Point Road as an example. I was asked to visit there 2 Fridays ago, and I did, and there was probably a dozen residents, like different families from that stretch, and we're standing in the driveway, and cars, landscaping vehicles, delivery vehicles, like you said. These are obviously neighbors. It's not a pass-through area like Murphy where people are heading out of the county. These are residents heading basically home. They've got to be doing 40 miles an hour past this. And so when the residents look at me like, what can we do about it? Then, of course, I contact you either through my aide or RFS or something. And, then Monday morning, some people want you to come specifically at a time so you can see the specific traffic. So Monday morning at 8 a.m., I'm standing on Murphy at a school bus stop, and the group of residents that were there off of Peninsula and Murphy, and the cars are flying by, and they're asking for things. Now, I know that some of them are not warranted or don't fall into, like you said, the engineering association rules and guidelines. But as commissioners and elected officials, we can't tell residents that. They don't want to hear, that Washington has a binder of criteria that has to be met. They just want to know, what are we going to do? So I said the most obvious, and none of these are foolproof, but the most reliable is a traffic signal. And we've spent a lot of time talking about traffic signals at South River, at Heritage, Heritage Ridge. We just put one in Murphy, and there were some people that were angry about not so much that we were going to put one, they were angry about where we were putting it. But now, almost a year later, and that's an expensive option, almost $400,000. A year later, it's sort of settled down and people got used to it. You guys were very helpful in putting elevated crosswalks on Berry. We had done one north of Martin Highway because there was a gentleman in a wheelchair that found it nearly impossible to be able to cross the street, so the county did that one. And then I duplicated that on the south side of Martin Highway on Berry because it's a long straightaway with no houses on either side and people just race. But there is a crosswalk because it is one of the access points for kids to come to school. And a lot of people were very angry, and even friends of mine and family members would say, oh, this is ridiculous, I have to go over this. But after a while, people got used to it. So the other one is a stop sign. And I know that you can't just throw stop signs up wherever we would like you to. Otherwise, I would carry a whole bunch of them in the trunk of my car. But the third one that is reasonable and I think is appropriate is the speed table. When Map Road was north of Martin Downs Boulevard was being repaved a couple years ago, it had always historically had a series of speed tables there. And when the road was being resurfaced, obviously they were grinded away, the road was resurfaced, and I got tons of feedback from people that said, oh, thank God those speed tables are gone. And other people said, when are they coming back? So I agree with you that it's a very contentious item, but even as a commissioner, I would personally like to fall on the side of putting them in and frustrating some drivers on the side of safety and cautious driving. When people say, oh, if I go over there and my car bottoms out, I mean, you've taught me this, that speed tables are designed to be gone over at a certain speed. If it's a 25-mile-an-hour speed table and you're doing 35 miles an hour or 40 miles an hour over it, the possibility of banging and bottoming out your car is greater. But if you did the actual speed limit, it would be much safer. So I plan on using some of my district funds, because I know you don't have an unlimited budget for just putting these things around. I know that about a year and a half ago you guys came up with that rubberized version. You guys call it temporary. I know it's not officially temporary because you got to spike it down into the ground with 500 spikes or something like that. But I like that idea as a sort of, because what does a paved speed table cost approximately?
We're generally in the $15,000 to $20,000 range.
Right. So, I mean, some people think, well, it's just some asphalt. You bring the truck out, you pour a little hump of asphalt, you round it over a couple of times and paint some lines on it, and it's good to go. It's $20,000. So it is, from our perspective, it's just a commitment of district funds. But I have a list in my pocket, and I'm not going to share it now, that I've been carrying around because I can't forget where these are. I meet with so many different people, neighbor groups, that I would forget how many are in request, and I've stood at each of these locations, and I'll tell you, they warrant it. Because if someone rides a bike out into the street, these are not rural arterials or urban arterials where it's 35 or 45 miles an hour. We're talking about neighborhood streets where driveways go right down onto the street, but a car could pass you at 40 miles an hour past your home. So I plan on, and if even on my list of 3 priorities, I've made traffic safety one of my biggest priorities because it is. And so I plan on using that tool that you guys have, either the rubberized version or the official asphalt version, and start putting these around. And I don't mind fielding phone calls from people that are angry, because if you're doing the speed limit over a speed table, there's no problem. And I'm not going to take a call from someone who tells me that their dog, which had happened on Roby's Way, a dog was hit and killed by a car while we were negotiating whether or not we were going to put a speed table there. That could have been a child chasing that dog out into the street, and none of us want to have that. And I think this is one of the most serious issues we can be discussing. So I appreciate today's agenda item, and to let my colleagues know and staff that, we're going to really address this in District 5, because it's like one of my top priorities. It's not just an inconvenience, it's a huge safety issue. And none of us want to get the phone call that someone got killed while we were deciding if we should have done it or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Hurd.
Yeah, I agree with you, Commissioner Campy. This is a provincial issue for each one of us. And my concerns are provincial also. My concerns are about Rocky Point. It's except for a boatyard, it is exclusively residential. Every street in there is local. There are driveways on every single street. There's access, there's a perimeter road, 3-4 perimeter roads, but those are residential in nature. And the speed limit is 35. It's insane. I mean, the side streets are 25. What's the difference between those local roads and the perimeter local roads? It's nothing but local roads. It's nothing but residential. It's nothing but single-family residential on those roads also. So it warrants having a local speed zone. I'm astonished to hear that Ridge Road now has a posted speed zone of 25. It's a major arterial, right? And it's got a 25-mile speed limit. I want that. And also, we took up some baby steps and put stop signs in. The stop signs are fabulous. Everyone is enforcing them. I haven't heard any complaints. I've just heard compliments about how confident everyone feels about entering that very, very busy, congested intersection. So I'm just asking a question: why on earth are my local roads not posted with a local road speed limit?
So, Jim Gorton, for the record, the roads that you're speaking of, Cuban and Robertson, are classified as collectors. They're not classified as local roads.
But they are local roads.
That's why they have a 35-mile-per-hour speed limit. It's because of the classification of those roads, and they're considered collectors because all of the side streets feed out into them, and then they're the main arterials to get out to off of Rocky Point. That's what the classification of the roadways are, and that's what dictates the speed limit.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, that 85th percentile speed, that's the driver's perception of, hey, I could go this fast and get away with it. I'm risking hitting that child that could run after that ball or that dog. And that's where certain roadways carry more cars, and those cars are generally in a hurry if it's that 7 or 8 a.m. time period. And we want to highlight that there are multiple options in the toolbox to try and change that target speed down to those miles an hour that you're requesting on those local roadways or collector roadways. And Commissioner Hetherington has a great project that's going on in front of the golf course. We're doing a splitter island in tandem with the stop sign. Once the golf course is operational as it's intended to be, we've changed the characteristic of that roadway by changing access and by implementing the splitter island and landscaping. So there are different tools that apply and are applicable everywhere, but then there's always some give and take within the right-of-way. Generally, in most residential areas, people like that area down on the other side of the swale, which is in the county right-of-way. They use it to store their boats or their cars or excess parking. I mean, that's key right-of-way that we could use to implement splitter islands, speed tables. I mean,
I've tried that at great expense and ripped them out, and that's no fun when you've just spent $20,000 a piece for 3 of them, and then rip them out two months later. Pardon me?
Why did you rip them out?
People didn't want them.
The residents insisted that they be put in, and then they insisted even more vehemently that they be taken out.
And that's what there are various traffic calming measures that will resonate with different residents. And together, with the CIP sheet and our capital projects division, we could come up with some good solutions. But there's always going to be some give and take. Speed tables aren't for everyone, as we've learned in Rocky Point, and sometimes they work in different neighborhoods. And we've learned raised crosswalks are a great opportunity to enhance pedestrian safety. So that's why they're a good measure with those crosswalks that already exist, where you have that pedestrian activity happening. So when people don't expect any pedestrians in the roadway, that's when they typically go faster. So
Well, we have raised crosswalks too, and they don't work either. For one thing, they're not striped, so people they're worn down so much that people don't recognize any longer that they're there, or at least that they're only going to cause minimal physical discomfort when they drive over them going 40 miles an hour.
But Commissioner Mr. Lambert, is that a policy-making decision? It seems that before changing that speed limit on Perimeter Road, is that something that the board could, without changing the designation of that from a collector to a local road? Because it seems St. Lucie Boulevard is, I don't know where it falls in that pyramid, but prior to me sitting here, I believe the board
voted on that.
changed that speed limit or lowered the speed limit. And even after lowering the speed limit, obviously we still had a lot of work to do to add all these different elements that kind of integrate what the neighbors are witnessing on the street. And it's taken a while.
I have a suggestion, and after listening to Sarah's folks coming in from Rocky Point, and we've certainly had our issues up in Jensen, in different neighborhoods. Something caught my eye right off in your presentation. The 85th percentile in the comp plan is driving a lot of this decision making, because you guys are looking back to justifying what you're doing because of the 85th percentile, what people are willing to speed or drive in the neighborhood, right? Perhaps it's time to fix that and change that. Maybe that should only apply to arterials and collectors. And something else I think all of us would agree, because every single one of us has a problem in 1, 2, 6 of our neighborhoods, that I am sure we, the board, you staff, can recommend to us, and with our help, your help, understanding which neighborhoods are which, we could classify neighborhoods as something if we chose by policy to classify them as a certain character. So even if in Sarah's district, she's got roads that are collectors, because they're acting as collectors. Rocky Point is a peninsula, generally speaking, it's a peninsula, landlocked piece of land. She's right. There's people that are coming in, coming out, with the exception of one marine facility, it's all residential. There's no reason why, I can't imagine, unless you tell us there's some law that says we can't do this, aside from what our comp plan may say, and if we have to change that, we have to change it. But why we can't define that type of a neighborhood, or my Skyline Heights neighborhood, or my South Street neighborhood, or wherever, as neighborhood local road, or whatever the term that gets applied versus a collector versus an arterial. That then, therefore, gets pulled out of this 85th percentile thing. And then once you define it and you defined a neighborhood, then the various tools that you can implement to correct the behavior still being used in that neighborhood, whether it's the speed limit, whether it's the speed table, and Ed, I agree with you on the rubber. I've gone down St. Lucie Boulevard recently. I went to the golf course yesterday. You can't drive over those rubber speed humps the same way you can drive over the speed tables that are out in Palm City, or even the city of Stewart has. You can go faster over them than those rubber ones. If you hit those rubber ones at 35, you're going to know it. I mean, I think you go down like 10 or 12 when you go over them, which is great. I mean, that was the whole idea, is slow people down. I just think whatever policy-wise we have got to do to extract neighborhoods out of the stereotypical, whether it's comp plan driven or some manual driven, give us the tools on the policy side. Forget the implementation things, because those will be specific to every neighborhood and what every neighborhood thinks is right for theirs. But if there's any hindrance at all in our way, whether it be comp plan, land development regulations, or whatever, strip them out at least on the neighborhood level, and give us the ability to define what we want to classify as a neighborhood. And I can guarantee you every single one of the 5 of us can tell you exactly which ones should apply and shouldn't. And then you start implementing the strategies that'll slow people down. Because my years of being here, we've been in this conversation 4 or 5 times. And I don't know that we've ever gotten to the root of changing the classifications versus a single street like yours coming to us and saying we want to be 25 or 15 or whatever miles an hour it is. In my opinion, that's silly. We should be able to define them by us making the policy of neighborhood design and saying, no, it's going to be 25 miles an hour or 15 miles an hour, whatever it needs to be. And then we'll regulate it, the physical behavior by the different components that are in place. I just think that's the only way we're going to stop this. Because otherwise, I mean, you physically, on Old St. Lucie Boulevard, you cannot go over those speed limits at 40 miles an hour anymore. I mean, the rubber speed tables, they absolutely work. And the only thing you get, the only problem I wonder on your monitoring the speed and on what's going on over there is, are people speeding back up to 45 until they get to the next one? Or is it actually slowing them down to 25 or 30? What I watched yesterday or the day before, generally speaking, people were probably doing 25 or 30. So anyway, that's my suggestion that we do.
Mr. Gordon?
Just going back to the 85th percentile, that is a federal classification, and it is based on the FHWA classification of the roadways. So we are working on, we can't change the classification of the roadway, but we can come back to you with some policy or some suggestions on how we can identify neighborhoods that we want to work on traffic calming or speed limit reductions.
So I'm not, it's not an argument, Jim, I'm just curious.
Yeah.
So at the federal level, the federal level is telling us that Rocky Point has to have collectors.
It's telling us that's how those roads behave. And I'm just going back all the way to the 2004 hurricanes. Back then, you could only pick up debris on FHWA roads versus FEMA roads. And we had a list of all of those roads. And Rocky Point was one that stood out to us. There's a lot of FHWA classified roads there because they're collectors.
So as another suggestion, Palm Beach County, for good or for bad, whatever anybody thinks, one way or the other, they have a lot of their traditional neighborhoods, and they have done all sorts of things in those older residential neighborhoods. There are no 35 or 45 mile an hour speed limits in those older neighborhoods. And I went through some of them the other day. They're 15, they're 25, they're not 30 or 40. Now, they may have chose to say, we're going to exempt ourselves from these federal standards. And if there's a way to do that, there has to be. And if reach out to Palm Beach County or to the municipalities down there that have done those things, because they can't be any different than us. And they've obviously figured out that they don't want through traffic going at 40 miles an hour through their neighborhoods. So how do we do it? I think that's all I'm asking for us, is to bring us back. We understand what the tools are. We get the physical tools you can put in the ground or bolt to the asphalt. What are the policy issues that are in our way of changing the classification of a Rocky Point or of a Skyline Heights, for instance, or Ed's neighborhood?
Lucas?
And just, sorry to reiterate on the classification, that's not set in stone that if it's a collector, it must be X mile per hour. As evidence on Bridge Road and Map Road Town Center, those are your collectors where your local roads are feeding into, serving as that thoroughfare to move people and goods in and out. It's really the characteristic of the roadway that you induce, and you have the motorist feel like, hey, I have to drive 25 on St. Lucie because that's what the roadway makes me do to feel safe. So classification is useful for us for many different reasons, and it's not just set in stone that because it's a collector, the 85th percentile speed must be this, and the posted speed must be this. We want to design for the target speeds that we want on those roadways, and so that's just wanted to point that out. So
right,
we
but
could,
correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm not angry at you guys. I'm just, this is, for 20 years, every time we've had this conversation, the first thing we do is we go out and do a speed study on the road. And we take the 85 percentile and says, ooh, 45 is the 85 percentile, that's the speed limit. And then, so the information that we present to ourselves and to the public is we can't touch this road because that's what people feel comfortable driving at. Now, I get all the swales and I get the shoulders and all that kind of stuff. There has got to be a way for us to pull this out and do it differently. But Don's going to tell me no.
Don?
I'm going to give you the option. So I think Don Donaldson, Deputy County Administrator, and previously your county engineer in years past. But the issue, I think, with the Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices, the federal document that the state adopts and which we fall under in establishing speed limits, is basically is that if the road was designed for 50 mile an hour highway and you arbitrarily set it at some speed limit of 25, for instance, you're just not going to get compliance because the road characteristic isn't there. And so the idea behind these speed limits and studies for engineering and establishing a legally defensible speed limit that law enforcement can enforce and is backed behind these regulatory issues is the basis by which these speed limits are established. Now, that's not to say that communities don't establish particular zones or speed limits based upon the characteristics they feel best. All we can tell you is at staff that if it comes down to a court implementation, clever attorneys may find a way that all of your rules are not defensible in court. Most of the times they aren't taken to court and people don't find ways to do that. But I think in our, that's all we can advise you. So the professionals can advise you on how speed limits are established and the proper characteristics, just like you can have a local road in Palm City Farms and Long and Straight. You got one house on it. It is a neighborhood, so to speak, but people are going to drive 40 miles an hour on it, even if it is a neighborhood street. So all I'm saying is that I think you have within your means, and you have done so in the past, if you want to establish a Rocky Point as a particular zone, all we can advise you is that just because you establish a speed zone doesn't mean the populous one will follow it. And that's why they're all about implementing constraints to try to trick the people into behaving like we want them to. Or you need excessive enforcement, like you drive through Sewell's Point, even though the road is straight and I can go quickly, I know I will get tagged pretty quickly by it. So those are the elements of enforcement. So that's really, I think the tool that you have is, and that we rely most on traffic calming and other physical attributes because they tend to work the best without oversight. Any other means that would be considered more policy driven as opposed to statistically driven are harder to implement unless you have heavy enforcement.
So the problem with all that, Don, I appreciate that. I sit on a statewide board for the transportation, long-range planning. What's the number one goal of FDOT?
Zero.
Goods and services.
No, zero fatalities and safety. Number one. All of this flies in the face of that. I'm not, it's not criticism of you. I'm just sharing with you that if all that were true, these roads, when they were built back in the 60s and 70s in these older neighborhoods, there were 10,000 people in Martin County, and people weren't in a hurry to go anyplace. It's a whole different society. It's a whole different need. And there's got to be a different conversation. And I say this to FDOT every single time I get a chance, and these guys have heard it on the MPO. Look, if you're really serious about zero fatalities and zero and safety, give us at the local level the tools to address our neighborhoods and local conditions that may not fit the Green Book, And I know that's nothing you can change here. I get it. But there's got to be a way to implement a different type of zone. And I'm guessing that the cities have figured it out, or they have just chosen with the risk management to say, we don't care. Our residents are more important, and safety in those neighborhoods are more important than worrying about the lawsuit that may happen to us if somebody chooses to sue us versus the child or the elderly or the other person getting hit and killed because we didn't do anything, in Ed's case he used in Palm City.
I think we understand that piece of it. I guess the only other thing I was just trying to implement is that just simply by changing the law doesn't mean it changes the behavior, and that's the tough part. Is how you change an entire behavior of a neighborhood with one element, and we have not been successful at that anywhere at this point. That's our challenge.
I would just add quickly, because I know Commissioner Campy has a whole list of items in his pocket that he, wants done in his district. But, I think all of us have those. And I think the amount of funding we have allocated right now for traffic calming is just not adequate to implement some of these, like you said, we have to enforce the compliance even if it already is a particular speed limit. So I think when we do our CIP that we need to look at adding additional funding to some of these traffic calming mechanisms. Commissioner Campy.
Thank you, but I go first because I brought it up first. Anyway, I think, at least from me, there's a couple of very interesting points. One, when you talk about the 85% people will follow the rules. I'm more concerned about the 15% that won't follow the rules. So in Commissioner Hurd's example, which I agree with her, she has whatever the official termination of term of those roads are. Her residential roads in Rocky Point are the same speed limit as Martin Highway in Palm City, which is 2 lanes with a landscaped median. It's the same speed limit. And there's no driveways that come out onto Martin Highway that are residential for the most part. I'm not, because you could make, and I tell this to people, you could make the speed limit 5 miles an hour. If people are not going to follow it, it doesn't make a difference what the speed limit is. So to fight the book and the federal government is not my concern. And when you were talking about, I think to me it's motorist conditioning. Sunset Trail has had speed tables on it forever. And everyone that drives down it understands that there are speed tables on it. Palm City Road in the city of Stuart, which is from, US 1, where Wendy's used to be, where now the Pentagon is, to like Palm City Bridge. That is a tremendous cut through for everyone that's coming from Palm City. And the city of Stuart that's got to be their #1 crazy spot. And what they've done there, just like Sewell's Point, is most people have now been conditioned to know that if you speed beyond 25 miles an hour on Palm City Road in the city of Stuart, you'll get a ticket. They have a smaller police force. They can put a guy out there. It's a #1 priority for them. He stands outside of his vehicle with a radar gun, and it's like fishing in a barrel. So after a while, motorists are conditioned to either not go that way and go around the long way and stay on Canner, US 1 to Canner to Monterey, or you do the speed limit. Everyone knows that as you get over the bridge from Stuart heading towards Sewell's Point, they only have that short stretch between the bridges from Benihana to Premier Realty. And quite often there is a Sewell's Point police officer right in that parking lot to the right, because they do not want you to speed through that section. And I think people have been conditioned to slow down. I believe that safety trumps convenience. So I was interested to hear what happened in Commissioner Hurd's district, why she put speed tables in. And I know that the huge uproar, because Don was the first person that ever told me this, Mr. Donaldson, when he was the engineer, that they don't like to spend all this money putting in, asphalt speed tables, because quite often you have to grind them out, because the uproar against them is louder than the original uproar to install it. How much are those rubber speed tables?
Around 6,000.
Okay, 6,000 versus 20,000, 15 to 20,000. And how many do we own? Well, we only have like 5, right?
She's got 1.
Yes, we own about 5, I think.
We own
Yeah.
5, and the cost is also to install it. That's the
Above and
purchase
beyond the
price.
6,000.
Okay, so what would you say?
Just a couple $1,000s.
Okay,
And
so
you're
eight-
probably $8,000 by the time.
$8,000 versus 20. And if it, push comes to shove and you have to get them out, we put one at the county line on Murphy. And, and the staff already is very familiar with this. We've been trying very hard to come up with every single thing, and that's a 20-year. Dieter Lizzie did it before me, then it was me, then it was Haddix, then it was me again. We've all been trying to figure out Murphy Road because the huge influx of people. Now you can imagine if you don't even live in the area, you have no problem speeding through the area. That's a real cut through. We put one of those rubberized speed tables there. People started to drive off the road into the grass to avoid just going over the speed table. So then we planted bushes, and they ran all the bushes over to avoid the speed table. So I think we put, oak trees or palm trees or concrete barriers there
2 or 3 cabbage palms.
because we're trying to condition motorists. So I don't personally care what the speed limit is. I'm going with speed tables because there's nothing that trumps safety. Convenience doesn't. And so if there's going to be a frustration, I'd rather do that, because if you want to talk about legal enforceability and things like that, let someone have a long track record of contacting the county, putting RFSs into the system, contacting their county commissioners, and someone get hurt on the street there. I mean, even if it's not a legal victory, the moral weight of that, at least on me, and I'm assuming my colleagues feel the same way, it's not worth it. If someone's frustrated, oh, I can't speed down that street to my house anymore, tough luck. I remember when, it's in every community when police officers write speeding tickets, what does everybody say? What, do you got to meet a quota? It's the end of the month? Or is this is an excellent way for the county to make money off the taxpayers? And what I would say to people is, look, I have a foolproof way that you will never get another speeding ticket. Don't speed. But we're not talking about on 95 or the Turnpike. We're talking about in our own neighborhoods. I live in a neighborhood that has a gate in the front, and people race past my house. They're my neighbors, and they're still doing 35 or 45. It doesn't make a difference if the speed limit is cute, like some places the speed limit is 7 or 11. People still do whatever speeds they want. The only thing that's going to stop them is a stop sign, a traffic light, or a speed table. I'm in on the speed tables.
And stop sign.
Yeah, but people blow stop signs, and then it creates a weird false sense of security because you're thinking, I have the right of way, the side street has a stop sign, I can go straight, but that person looks at stop signs as a suggestion. And so I'm about this, and I plan on really instituting it in a big way with the staff's help. I agree with what Commissioner Hetherington said. If there's not enough money in our budget for this, it's got to be one of our top priorities, safety of our residents. It's FDOT's, Doug's right, it's FDOT's number one priority, and I don't think it's marketing. The state has we have the highest fatality rate for bicyclists. I'm sure we must have one of the highest fatality rates for pedestrians. Everyone talks about how crazy Florida drivers are. A lot of them came from somewhere else, and they just don't seem to care. I'll stand with the residents that say, don't let people race past my house anymore. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Well, thank you, gentlemen. And with that, we are going to move on to departmental number 8, which is our last item of the day. Update on the development of the Lake Okeechobee System Operating Manual. Mr. John Mayle.
Hopefully that's not in focus, right?
Good afternoon. This is John Mayle, the Martin County Ecosystem Division Manager. And this is a presentation to provide an update to the board on the Lake Okeechobee System Operating Manual development process. Martin County in 2018 in October assembled a team of internal and external specialists to participate as stakeholders in the development of a new lake schedule that was directed to be developed by the Army Corps as a result of the 2018 Water Resources Development Act. And it was directed to coincide with the completion of the Herbert Hoover Dike repairs. So our first step was to develop a pretty thorough scoping document that really would guide the rest of our activities as stakeholders advocating for Martin County's interests. And then we transitioned into a phase of working with the Army Corps to develop performance measures, performance metrics, performance indices that would all be used to evaluate the adverse impacts or the beneficial impacts to each stakeholder by every plan that comes out. And then as of about the last update I think I brought to the board, October of last year, the Corps of Engineers released 27,000 conceptual plans that met two restrictions. The first was that it could not violate the risk threshold for the Herbert Hoover Dike, and it couldn't violate the water quality limits that were set legally for Everglades National Park. So everything else came through, and they were all kind of oriented towards stakeholder interests. Of those 27,000, there was quite a few that were specifically geared towards eliminating any non-emergency discharges to the St. Lucie River. As of February 22nd, we've kind of completed the analysis of those, and we, as stakeholders that have all put forward plans that we thought fairly represented each stakeholder's interests. Martin County's, all of the Martin County constituents collectively submitted from a suite of plans that eliminated any non-emergency discharges. And we'll get into those in just a second. But I want to point out on the lower right-hand corner of this slide, this is where we're going, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail shortly. So these next 2 pages illustrate the 10 plans that stakeholders put forward from the Pareto analysis to represent their individual interests, and 4 plans that were developed either as a requirement of the Water Resources Development Act or by individual stakeholders that created their own plans. You'll notice, I'm not going to go through each one of these, but you'll notice towards the bottom, the description, enhance ecology in St. Lucie Estuary. There was a recommended plan that the Corps selected based on input from all the Martin County stakeholders in the 4C1 category. That was Plan 22448, which eliminates discharges to the St. Lucie River except for emergency discharges that are in the high band. One of the things that we have been advocating in the balancing conversation, which is where we're at now, is how many of these 4C1 plans that were brought forward by Martin County stakeholders also work quite well for many of the other stakeholders. And this is illustrated on this slide, particularly in that if you look up at Plan 2B, that plan was selected to represent the needs of recreation on Lake Okeechobee. You'll notice that the recommended plan is a 4C1, which is one of the plans that was developed to eliminate discharges to the St. Lucie River. It happens that many of those plans also work well for many of the other stakeholders, so much so that the recreation stakeholders chose one of those plans as well. This is where I want to spend the bulk of the presentation today. As of February 22nd, as I said, we started into the discussion about how to balance stakeholder interests and come up with actual schedules that the Corps believes would balance all the stakeholders' needs and benefits. We put forward primarily this group of arguments, largely that were addressed in our scoping comments and we have been advocating for throughout the entire process, because we believe this makes the best argument for us for balancing those schedules in favor of reducing discharges. So I'll just briefly touch on each of those. The first is that there really never was a historic connection to the St. Lucie River by Lake Okeechobee. There's actually 2 ridges that divided the lake from Allapattah Flats from the St. Lucie Estuary, and lake water never historically would have in any stage of the lake overflowed into the St. Lucie River. It made us unique as a stakeholder that our connection to Lake Okeechobee is completely engineered. Along those lines, there's also no ecological benefit in our relationship to Lake Okeechobee. There are stakeholders that have enhanced relationships to the lake by engineering, but then they also have an ecological dependency on the lake. We have only an adverse relationship with the lake. And one of the arguments that we have been making at every opportunity is that we believe the Corps of Engineers has a responsibility to reduce or eliminate any damages in their system before they start to parse out benefits, of which we have no participation. In the evaluation of these different plans, salinity has kind of been the key indicator, but we continue to make it abundantly clear that salinity is not the only factor. Salinity is just a useful indice for a lot of other factors, including nutrients, for which the St. Lucie River is impaired, nitrogen and phosphorus, and suspended solids, for which our primary suspended solid contribution to the estuary comes from the C44. While we get nutrients from lots of sources, almost all of the suspended solids or muck that comes to the river comes through the C44. There's another point that we are increasingly making is that while one of the stated purposes of developing a new lake schedule was the management or the risk associated with harmful algal blooms, and to date the Corps has been unable to come up with a metric that appropriately applies to the plan for capturing HAB impacts to the estuary. That's a pretty important issue, and it's one that has not been addressed. We believe and have been advocating that calls for a certain conservativeness with discharges. If they've been unable to model the impacts of it, that it requires of them that they be more conservative in the schedule development. Along those same lines, we provided some very good information on the correlation between discharges and impacts to coral reef on our nearshore reef. And they were unable to model that, or unwilling to model it, maybe better said. And so the plan is going to be without an appropriate measure of the impact to our nearshore coral reef. We believe that's another reason for conservativeness in a schedule that discharges to the St. Lucie River. Another factor that makes us somewhat unique as recipients of Lake Okeechobee water is that we don't get any water quality treatment for the water that comes to us. Well, most of the other stakeholders that get water from Lake Okeechobee, they get it from a shallow area that has vegetated littoral shelf that has demonstrated empirical nutrient and sediment removal qualities. Ours comes right out of the deep part of the lake, or like scientists like to call it, the pelagic zone. And it's 1 for 1. Whatever nutrients and suspended solids are in that part of the lake come to the estuary. And we also believe that, like I said earlier, that, and have been saying with increasing passion, is that there's an obligation to stop the adversity of the relationship before they start parsing out the benefits. Coming up next, we've got a couple of months that are probably the most critical of this entire process. So like I said, February 22nd, we really began the balancing discussion. That will continue until April 12th, when we expect that the Corps will have developed their first array of actual schedules. We believe that there'll be 9 schedules presented to the stakeholders. And we will, at that point, we'll continue the conversation about our balancing objectives and concepts. And then less than a month later, they're telling us there'll be 3 schedules. And by July, we'll have 1 schedule. And from that schedule, they'll develop the environmental impact statement and a record of decision by the end of the year. So we really are at a critical time for the public to be engaged. And we're encouraging everyone that has an interest in this to use these balancing concepts that we've put forth, and any of their own that we've got a lot of intelligent, creative people working on this in our constituency. But most importantly, we need folks engaged over the next couple months. I know that Martha Ann and Laura in our communications office, we're working closely with them to make sure that these meetings are advertised well, and that our local constituents are aware of them and can participate. So I know that you're probably all a little bit interested in what's happening right now. So this is not directly related to the development of LOSUM, but we have fairly high lake conditions for this time of year. In fact, we're discharging, as of the early part of March, we've started receiving 500 CFS, or about 300 million gallons a day. And there's really, that's going to continue probably throughout the dry season. Nobody ever knows exactly what's going to happen with the weather, but as it is now, the Army Corps would like to get the lake to 12.5 feet by June 1st. There's about a 1% chance of that happening without having some significant discharge or releases from Lake Okeechobee. As of now, like I said, they're discharging 500 CFS to us, about 2,000 CFS to the west, of which a significant portion is beneficial. And then about 2,500 CFS is going south. It appears mostly for irrigation, but it's still water going south. About 1,000 CFS is going to Everglades National Park as of today. I'm not going to show you I'm not going to belabor this one because that's usually antiquated the day after we post it. The lake level today is about 14.75, so 14 3/4 feet. If you look at this chart, this is from the Corps of Engineers. This shows the last 2.5 years, and this blue shaded area shows the lake level. And you can see we had a very good recession rate in the dry season of 2019, which brought us to 10.79 feet on June 1st, 2019. You'll remember 2019 we had no discharges. And we had a short and dry wet season that year. We ended the year at 13.97, had a typical dry season, and ended June 1st of 2020 at 11 feet. This year, without discharges, the 50% probability is about 13.5 feet by June 1st. That extra foot would come from the releases that the Corps is using right now, and it's happening under the HAB deviation. I won't go into detail on that, but I would say, I'm not a gambling person, but I'd say there's about an 80% chance we'll have summer discharges that would likely, almost certainly, have blue-green algae. So this conversation continues to be extremely germane, and it's just behoove of us to continue to stay engaged at the highest level on the development of this lake schedule. With that, I'd take any questions.
Great. That was a great presentation. Commissioner Smith.
I agree, John. Thank you. Just two thoughts. One, do we at some point, as those 9 or 6 recommendations that will be coming out, do we as a commission weigh in on them as to our preferences, or is it just moving through a process that we don't actually get a say?
We'll have significant opportunity. Members of your staff are on the project delivery team, and then there's also opportunities for the public at large to input.
I mean the board, though.
So at your direction, if you'd like us to bring them to you, we would be happy to follow your direction on that, and then we could kind of walk you through. So when we get those schedules, there's a copious amount of data that comes with them about all the impacts to performance measures, and we could have, it's up to you, but we could do a workshop, or we could meet with you one-on-one, however you'd like to do it.
I think it'd be helpful. I think we should be engaged in it as well. I think that third to last slide where you had the positions, keep going back. There you go. That was spot on. I mean, I don't know that it could be, I'm sure it could be different, but I think that sums up our, at least how I think about this stuff, and some of it I never would have thought about, but it's great. But I think at some point we should be saying we prefer this as a commission, as a county direction. Secondly to that, relative to Martha Ann and her strategy, not only should we be informing the stakeholders, but I think publicly we should be communicating out our position through her to the media, to everybody else, that this is where Martin County stands on this stuff, and why and how, and telling our story. The hardest part you get into something like this is somebody else telling our story and the way they want to tell it versus how this has been outlined and how you just did exactly what you did. You've told our story, our piece of it, which I think is brilliant. And again, thank you.
Certainly.
Thank you. Commissioner Hurd.
Were there any significant updates yesterday?
Yesterday was more the core gathering input from us. There's some, you can get into the weeds pretty quickly, but there are some nuances that we needed to have answers to. For example, for S308 regulatory flows, the future without condition was worse than our baseline, which is our existing condition. And with the addition of the C44 reservoir this year, there's no explanation for that. So we're trying to get the modelers to explain why that is. One of the things that's come to light is that just in the last 24 hours is that the Kissimmee River Restoration recently ratified their operations manual, and I think everyone expected that restoration effort would result in less wet season flows into the lake and dry season releases, and it did just the opposite according to the model. And so now we're focusing. This is kind of like Bop-O-Mole, but they're giant, arduous moles to bop. So we are now trying to unpack how did that happen, what does it mean, and what opportunities do we have to suggest a change to that. I think we'll have a lot of partners among the lake stakeholders in that effort. So the other thing that we brought up yesterday, we continue to bring up all these things. I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. We were talking about the.
Also, there are no performance measures for impacts to nearshore coral, but the presentation that we had 2 weeks ago said that we have indeed created our own baseline for the last 4 years, so we should have plenty of information to provide. Presumably, we are providing that information.
Yeah, precisely, Commissioner Hurd. In fact, we sent them, more or less an assembled performance measure for coral last fall, and we were not willing to own that performance measure because they should own that piece, and they weren't willing to develop it at this stage in the game. We think it's an issue of great concern for us, and it's one we'll continue to bring up. And potentially, it's one that leverages an outcome for us. In fact, the fact that they weren't able to address that, and yes, the correlation rate is significantly higher than some of the existing correlations that were used as performance measures in the system. So, yep, absolutely.
And I agree with Commissioner Smith that it's absolutely imperative over the next, until July, until we get the kind of the final results before the record of decision, we need to make sure that our citizens know what we're doing, are engaged, know how to participate. We need to start doing those things now, because I agree with you. I think that this summer is going to be disastrous for us, particularly if the rains were anything like they were in October and November. So that we're going to have harmful algal blooms because the lake is so high right now, and the temperatures have been so much higher than historically they are. So I think it's you've done a terrific job. I'm really, really proud of the team that we've assembled, and but we need to make sure that Martin County residents are participating with us.
I agree. Great. Thank you for that presentation.
Thank you very much, John Mail.
Okay, that brings us to the end of our day. We are going to take public comment. End of the day public comment.
Oh, there's some end of the day public comment.
Hi, Jim Moyer, resident of Rocky Point, 52 Southeast Williams Way. Just a note, Commissioner Hurd is right. The traffic out on Rocky Point is really dangerous. My bigger issue is really the last three presentations you received today. I'll take the traffic presentation out of that. There are things that we should be doing about shoreline stabilization that we can, as a community, do better. I think that we could focus on low impact development as practiced in Pinellas County and several other counties around the state, as well as municipalities, to work on stormwater on site rather than using roadscapes to convey water to an SDA or some other thing. I think that sooner or later those are going to be very difficult to use as sea level rises. We can be a lot more strict about setback requirements and reducing setback requirements for shoreline protection zones. I think that we are going to need those shoreline protection zones intact and as natural as possible. And that has, benefit not only for the community's stabilization from impacts of climate change, sea level rise, and storm effect, but also to reduce the nutrient loads that go into our river. I've been here for 29 years now, and I've never seen the river as bad as it is right now. It is unfortunately really a dying place, and we really as a community need to get seriously behind doing whatever we can to treat our water better. I think that the county is doing a great job with LOSM, but the water quality standards that we have set for ourselves have allowed the seagrasses to die. They have allowed most of the meiofauna to go away. The manatees are dying all the time right now, not just in Brevard County, but down here as well. This is really, really, really a very bleak sort of outlook for what was once the most biodiverse estuary in North America. I think that there's nothing that we should be contemplating that is more important than figuring out what we've done wrong and reversing that. And that's really up to us. That's not up to a federal agency to figure it out for us or to manage something that is really, frankly, beyond their control as well. I think low impact development is something that we should do. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no, is there anyone on Zoom that would like to comment? No? Okay, we're going to take commissioner comments. Commissioner Jenkins. Commissioner Smith? Commissioner Camping?
No, I am good, but I have a couple of comments, just an observation to make, Madam Chair. Today was a unique day because we had several presentations from staff that we don't normally have, especially so many in a row. We had growth management, then we had the CRA, then we had a resiliency presentation, and then we had traffic safety issues, and then just now we had the LOSUM and information about Lake O. When you consolidate all those presentations together in one day, it really should make all of us, and I know it does, proud of the staff that we have assembled to do our work here in Martin County. The knowledge and the expertise and their experience is, I mean, large counties that have much larger budgets and have a lot more hiring muscle, and to potentially to offer some of these superstars that work here, their key ingredient that everyone that presented today, which is just a cross-section of our staff, is their passion. These are experts. I mean, we're sort of spoiled by the fact that these people come and they're not reading from notes. They know this forward and backwards, and I'm so proud of them. I know Commissioner Hurd had said something about George Stokas this morning, which is right. I mean, so many communities are struggling and stumbling with how to process this unheard of amounts of money in such a fair way. How many people complained to any of us about how that process went down? Every not-for-profit was pleased. Every organization was pleased. I never heard any bad pushback from anything. How we're conducting resiliency in many other communities, resiliency is laughed at and mocked, and people refuse to even discuss it. But here we have a very logical approach to it. The team we put together to battle this LOSUM strategy, which Commissioner Smith and Commissioner Hurd will tell you happens, what, every 20 years? We put a team together out of Martin County that any county in Florida would be thrilled to have, and most of them are our internal staff. And so today was one of those days that made me proud to be a commissioner, but more importantly made me proud to live here, because we don't have a monstrous staff, but boy are they fantastic. We take so much of it for granted. I just wanted to take a second to share with you that, and I'm sure you felt the same way, it was so obvious today how great our team is. Thank you.
Agree. Commissioner Hurd.
I'm set.
Ms. Krista? Ms. Woods?
All right, just have a quick, as the board may know, the EOC is being upgraded with furniture and equipment because they're being updated because the equipment and the furniture is outdated. So the idea is we're going to have a more EOC that also can serve as a training facility. This conversion includes new furniture and desks. The vendor quoted us a cost of over $9,000 to dismantle and haul away the workstations. So we went to our purchasing manual to see if we could have somebody to provide a bid. The highest bid was $61, and that did not include taking it apart. Meanwhile, our emergency management director advises that Gulf County would really like to take our workstations as well as the outdated computer, and they will come and get it and transport it back to Gulf County at no cost. I will tell you we're in the process, as you may or may not know, of revising the exact language in our purchasing manual about how this is done. And it's so our current manual talks about donating property in this situation to nonprofits. Obviously, Gulf County isn't that, doesn't meet that requirement, but it is consistent with Florida law about the disposition of surplus property. So, and they really do need it.
I
So,
bid $65.
so no, so there is a path forward. Your purchasing manual allows you to waive the provisions of the manual in limited instances. What I would request is a motion to waive the provisions of section 26.3, which talks about a nonprofit, and authorize a donation of the EOC workstations and computer equipment to Gulf County. And this is in accordance with Florida law, section 274.05. Thank you.
Commissioner Camping.
I make that motion that Ms. Woods just mentioned.
I
Thank you.
second that motion that Ms.
Thank you all.
Okay. Motion on the floor by Commissioner Camping, seconded by Commissioner Jenkins. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Yes, Commissioner Smith.
Just one quick last comment to follow up on Ed's comments earlier, like really quick. I said this 2 weeks ago at the commission meeting. All of what Ed said, I concur with 100%. It also takes amazing leadership of those two seats over to our right to pull all this off and create the team that you all just bragged about. So I don't want to leave them out of the equation, because without those two stable,
And what about Don Donaldson, superstar?
he'll be there. He'll he'll fit there. It just, whenever we do something like that, the first thought that comes to mind is the folks that helped put the whole team together in the first place. So thank you.
I agree 100%. And our upcoming meetings are April 13th and 27th. April 27th, as will be regular meetings, and we have our CIP workshop on April 13th. With that, we are adjourned.